I stared at my father's text message while sitting in my corner office overlooking Manhattan. "You're not welcome in our five-star hotel. Don't embarrass us again by showing up uninvited." The irony made me laugh out loud. My parents, Robert and Patricia Wellington, had no idea their precious Grand Wellington Hotel was now part of my company's portfolio. I picked up my desk phone and called security. "Please revoke the Wellington family's VIP access immediately. Their key cards would stop working at midnight. Sometimes justice comes full circle." The Wellington name had meant something in the hospitality industry for 3 generations. My grandfather built the Grand Wellington from nothing, transforming a modest inn into one of New York's most prestigious hotels. Growing up, I spent countless hours roaming those marble corridors, dreaming of the day I'd help run the family empire. But dreams have a way of shattering when you're born the wrong child in your parents' eyes. My father, Robert Wellington, took over the hotel when I was 5 years old. He strutted through the lobby like a peacock, his Italian leather shoes clicking against marble floors that maintenance staff polished to mirror perfection every morning at 4. My mother, Patricia, floated beside him in her designer dresses, her perfectly manicured fingers adjusting flower arrangements that already stood flawless. Together, they built their kingdom on the foundation my grandfather laid, expanding from 1 property to 3, each more opulent than the last. But in their eyes, the crown had only one rightful heir, my younger brother, Marcus. From the moment Marcus could walk, our parents groomed him for greatness. While they enrolled him in junior business camps and brought him to board meetings, they sent me to etiquette classes and ballet lessons. "A lady should know how to move gracefully through a room," my mother would say, straightening my posture with a firm hand on my spine. "Your brother will need a proper hostess when he takes over." I was 15 when I first challenged their vision. During a family dinner in our penthouse apartment, I presented a detailed proposal for converting unused conference rooms into co-working spaces for business travelers. I'd spent weeks researching trends, calculating potential revenue, even creating mock-ups on my computer. My father barely glanced at the folder before sliding it back across our mahogany dining table. "Stick to what you know best, Antonia," he said, returning to his lobster thermidor. "Planning charity galas and looking presentable. Business isn't for everyone." The dismissal stung worse than any slap, but pain has a way of transforming into determination when it simmers long enough. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. While my family slept in their silk-sheeted beds, I filled out applications for night business courses at the community college. If they wouldn't teach me the family business, I'd learn it elsewhere. For 3 years, I lived a double life. Days were spent fulfilling my parents' expectations, attending society luncheons, organizing fundraisers, smiling prettily at their business associates. But when darkness fell, I became someone else entirely. I'd slip out through the service elevator, trade my cocktail dresses for jeans and sneakers, and lose myself in accounting principles and marketing strategies until 2 in the morning. The exhaustion was worth it. Every formula I mastered, every case study I analyzed, felt like a small rebellion against the future they'd mapped out for me. My professors, who knew nothing of my last name or family legacy, praised my insights and dedication. One even suggested I apply for an internship at Celestial Hotels, the Grand Wellington's biggest competitor. I should have known better than to take it. But at 18, the opportunity to work in actual hotel operations, even at a rival chain, was too tempting to resist. I applied under my middle name Marie and listed my grandmother's maiden address. When they offered me a position in housekeeping at their Midtown property, I accepted immediately. Those early morning shifts taught me more about hospitality than 17 years in the Wellington penthouse ever had. I learned how guests treated staff when they thought no one important was watching. I discovered which amenities actually mattered and which were just expensive decorations. Most importantly, I understood that a hotel's true foundation wasn't marble floors or crystal chandeliers, but the people who made it run. For 8 months, I balanced both worlds perfectly. My parents never suspected their daughter was scrubbing toilets at their competitor while they slept. I became an expert at hiding calluses under expensive manicures and explaining away my constant exhaustion as late nights with friends. The deception might have continued indefinitely, if not for one fateful October morning. I was restocking amenities in the penthouse suite when she walked in. My mother, Patricia Wellington, stood frozen in the doorway, her Chanel bag slipping from her shoulder as her eyes processed what she was seeing. Her daughter, dressed in a polyester uniform, pushing a housekeeping cart through a celestial hotel suite. The silence stretched between us like a tightrope about to snap. Then, with a composure that would have impressed royalty, she closed the door behind her and approached me with measured steps. When she spoke, her voice could have frosted windows in July. "So this is where you've been spending your mornings, cleaning up after our enemies like some common—" She couldn't even finish the sentence, as if saying maid might make it more real. I straightened my spine, meeting her gaze with a defiance I'd never shown before. "I'm learning the business from the ground up, something you and Dad never let me do at home." Her laugh was bitter as burnt coffee. "The business you think scrubbing floors teaches you about running a luxury hotel, you're delusional, Antonia. And worse, you're a traitor." That word hung between us like a blade. Traitor, as if learning and working were crimes against the family name. "I'm trying to understand hospitality," I said, my voice steadier than my hands. "Real hospitality, not just the version from the penthouse." Her face contorted with a rage I'd never seen before. "You've embarrassed us, humiliated the Wellington name. What happens when someone recognizes you, when our associates discover our daughter is playing maid for our competition? Maybe they'll respect someone willing to work for their knowledge instead of having it handed to them." The slap came so fast I didn't see it coming. My cheek blazed with heat as she stepped back, her chest heaving with fury. "You're done with this charade. You'll quit immediately and never speak of it again." "No." One word, 2 letters, the shortest declaration of independence ever spoken. Her voice dropped to Arctic levels. "Then you're no daughter of mine. Security will remove your belongings from the penthouse by evening. Don't bother coming home." She swept out of the room with the same grace she'd entered, leaving me standing there with a throbbing cheek and a housekeeping cart full of tiny shampoo bottles. I thought that was the worst it could get. I was wrong. 3 days later, my father summoned me to the Grand Wellington. Not to our home, not to his office, but to the boardroom where 12 members of the hotel's board of directors sat waiting. My mother perched at his right hand, Marcus at his left, both wearing expressions of smug satisfaction. Antonia Marie Wellington. My father began using my full name like a judge passing sentence. "You have betrayed this family's trust and sullied our reputation through your association with our competitors. Your actions show a complete lack of judgment and loyalty." I stood at the foot of the long conference table, feeling like a defendant without a lawyer. The board members, men and women who'd watched me grow up, avoided my eyes with practiced discomfort. "Therefore," he continued, his voice carrying the weight of rehearsed words, "effective immediately, you are removed from the family trust, prohibited from using the Wellington name for business purposes, and barred from all family properties. You've chosen your path. Now walk it alone." The documents were already prepared. Marcus smirked as my father slid them across the polished table. 22 years of being a Wellington erased with a signature. As I signed my birthright away, my hand steady despite the earthquake in my chest, I made a silent promise. Someday I'd return, not as their discarded daughter, but as something they never expected, something they'd never see coming until it was too late to stop. The Celestial Hotel's employee break room at 3 in the morning became my sanctuary. While other housekeepers dozed between shifts or scrolled through their phones, I studied. Management textbooks spread across scratched tables, highlighted until the pages looked like neon rainbows. My supervisor, Rosa, would shake her head and bring me coffee without asking. "You're going to burn yourself out, Marie," she'd say, using the name I'd given when hired. Nobody here knew me as Antonia Wellington. That girl had been erased from existence with the stroke of a pen. 6 months after my disownment, I survived on 4 hours of sleep and sheer determination. My studio apartment in Queens cost $800 a month, leaving barely enough for ramen and subway fare after taxes. The trust fund that should have sustained me through life sat frozen, inaccessible, a number on paper that might as well have been fiction. But poverty teaches lessons privilege never could. I learned to see inefficiencies everywhere in the way we stock supply closets, in our scheduling systems, and the communication gaps between departments. While my former life had shown me hotels from the guest perspective, this one revealed the machinery underneath. Every wasted motion was money lost. Every unhappy employee was a future complaint waiting to happen. My breakthrough came during the holiday season. Celestial's Midtown property was hemorrhaging staff, with housekeepers calling in sick at record rates. The head of housekeeping, Donna, was near tears trying to cover shifts. I found her in her office at 5 a.m, surrounded by scheduling charts that looked like abstract art. "There has to be a better way," she muttered, erasing names and rewriting them for the dozenth time. "May I asked, gesturing at the mess. She laughed bitterly. "Sure, Marie, work your magic." I spent my break analyzing the patterns. The problem wasn't just sick days, it was predictability. Staff knew which shifts were hardest, which days saw the most checkouts, which floors demanded the most work. They were gaming the system because the system was gameable. What if we rotated the difficult assignments? I suggested, showing her a new chart I'd drawn. Nobody gets stuck with the penthouse suites every weekend. Everyone shares the load equally, and we offer incentive pay for holiday shifts instead of forcing them through seniority. Donna studied my work with growing interest. This could actually work, but corporate would never approve the incentive pay. What if it paid for itself through reduced overtime and temporary staff costs? I spent the next week preparing a presentation complete with cost projections and efficiency metrics. Donna was impressed enough to show it to her manager, who showed it to his. Within a month, my scheduling system was being tested across 3 properties. That's when Sarah Blackwood noticed me. The CEO of Celestial Hotels wasn't supposed to be at the Midtown property at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. But there she stood in the employee break room, silver hair gleaming under fluorescent lights, watching me update my scheduling charts. She wore a simple black suit that probably cost more than my yearly salary, but her eyes held something I recognized: hunger for excellence. "You're Marie, aren't you?" she said, sitting across from me without invitation. "The housekeeper who revolutionized our scheduling system." I nodded, suddenly aware of my uniform's polyester scratch against my skin. I just saw an opportunity for improvement. Most people see opportunities. Few act on them. Fewer still deliver results. She studied me with an intensity that felt like being X-rayed. "Tell me, what other opportunities do you see?" For the next hour, I forgot she was the CEO. I talked about guest flow patterns, about wasted space in our lobbies, about the disconnect between our luxury promise and our actual delivery. She listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or asking pointed questions that showed she understood every nuance. "How long have you been in housekeeping?" she finally asked. 18 months. "And before that?" The question hung between us like a trap. I'd practiced my cover story 1,000 times, but lying to those sharp eyes felt impossible. I studied business at night school while working various jobs. "I see." She stood, smoothing her skirt. "Marie, I'd like to offer you a position in our management training program. You'd start immediately, rotate through different departments, learn our operations from every angle. Interested?" My heart hammered against my ribs. Yes, absolutely, yes. Excellent. Report to my office Monday morning. We'll discuss your future. She turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Marie, your real name wouldn't happen to be Antonia, would it? Ice flooded my veins. How did you? Your grandmother and I were roommates at Vassar. You have her eyes, her way of tilting your head when you're thinking. Sarah's smile held secrets. She'd be proud of what you're building from the ground up, even if it's not with the family name. She left me sitting there drowning in implications. My grandmother, Elizabeth Wellington, had died when I was 10. I remembered her as a force of nature wrapped in Dior, a woman who built charitable foundations like other people built card houses. But I'd never known about her connection to Sarah Blackwood. That weekend, I spent hours Googling their history. The internet revealed a few photos from college mentions of them at charity events in the 70s. Then, nothing. Whatever friendship they'd shared had been private, kept away from society pages and business journals. Monday morning arrived with the weight of destiny. Sarah's office occupied the entire top floor of Celestial's headquarters, with views that made Manhattan look like a jewelry box. She sat behind a desk that was startlingly modern compared to my father's antique monstrosity, all clean lines and functional beauty. Sit, she said, gesturing to a chair that probably cost more than my monthly rent. We have much to discuss. For the next 2 hours, she laid out my future like a general planning a campaign. 6 months in each major department: operations, finance, marketing, guest services. I'd maintain my Marie identity professionally, but could be myself with her. The salary made my eyes water. $60,000 to start, with increases based on performance. Why, I finally asked, why take this chance on me? Sarah leaned back, her expression softening. Your grandmother was the smartest woman I ever knew. She built the Grand Wellington from nothing while your grandfather took the credit. Society's rules in those days you understand, but she never let limitations define her, and neither have you. You knew about my parents disowning me. I know Robert Wellington is a fool who confused conformity with competence. I know Patricia values appearances over ability, and I know they'll regret underestimating you. Her smile turned sharp. Success is the best revenge, Antonia. Let's give you the tools to achieve it. The management program was boot camp disguised as education. I shadowed department heads who treated inefficiency like personal insults. I analyzed spreadsheets until numbers danced in my dreams. I learned to read profit and loss statements like poetry, finding rhythm in the margins and meaning in the metrics. But it was in operations where I found my calling. The general manager of our Brooklyn property, James Chen, became my mentor. He taught me that hotels weren't just buildings. They were living organisms that breathed with the rhythm of human needs. Every decision rippled outward, affecting guests and staff in ways that spreadsheets couldn't capture. You think like an owner, not an employee, he told me after I presented a plan to convert unused basement space into staff wellness areas. That's rare. The idea had come from my housekeeping days, remembering how Rosa's back ached after 8-hour shifts, with nowhere comfortable to rest during breaks. My proposal included yoga mats, massage chairs, and quiet spaces for the meditation many of our immigrant staff practiced. The cost was minimal. The impact on morale was transformative. Word of the wellness rooms spread through Celestial's network. Other properties began implementing similar spaces. Staff retention improved. Guest satisfaction scores rose as happier employees provided better service. Sarah called me into her office 6 months into the program. I have a proposition, she said, sliding a folder across her desk. Our Miami property is failing. 20% occupancy hemorrhaging money staff morale in the basement. The previous manager left under unfortunate circumstances. I need someone hungry enough to attempt the impossible. I opened the folder to find disaster documented in spreadsheets and photos. The property looked like a luxury hotel that had given up on itself, dated decor, empty restaurants, a pool area that screamed neglect, despite Miami's perfect weather. You want me to manage this? I want you to transform it. Full authority to make changes within reason. If you can turn it around in 18 months, I'll make you the youngest VP in Celestial's history. She paused. If you fail well, you'll have learned valuable lessons about limitation. The challenge sparked something primal in my chest. This wasn't just about proving myself anymore. It was about resurrection. When do I start? Next Monday, and Antonia. Her expression grew serious. Miami's social scene is smaller than you'd think. You might encounter people who knew you before. Are you prepared for that? I thought of my parents, of Marcus, of the life I'd been exiled from. Let them see what they discarded. I'm not hiding anymore. Sarah's smile held approval, and something else, something that looked like anticipation. Then go show them what a Wellington woman can build when she's not confined by Wellington men. The celestial Miami beach stood like a fading starlet on Ocean Drive, desperately clinging to past glory. I arrived on a humid Monday morning to find the valet stand empty, the doorman scrolling through his phone, and exactly 3 cars in a parking lot built for 200. The Art Deco facade needed pressure washing, and the famous neon sign flickered with electrical problems nobody had bothered to fix. Inside, the lobby echoed with emptiness. A single front desk clerk looked up with surprise as if guests were mythical creatures rarely spotted in the wild. The marble floors were clean, but dull, lacking the deep shine that spoke of care and attention. Even the air felt tired, recycled through systems that hadn't been properly maintained in years. You must be the new manager. The clerk said, his name tag reading Carlos. His tone suggested he'd seen plenty of new managers come through these revolving doors, each making promises before fleeing to easier properties. Marie Rodriguez, I said, using the surname I'd legally added to maintain my cover. Call an all-staff meeting for 2 this afternoon. Attendance is mandatory. His eyebrows rose. Everyone, even housekeeping. Especially housekeeping. Every person who works here matters. I spent the morning walking every inch of the property, taking photos and notes. The presidential suite hadn't been occupied in 6 months. The rooftop restaurant was closed indefinitely, its kitchen gathering dust. The spa operated 3 days a week, when it felt like it. The pool bar's liquor selection looked like a college party's leftovers. But underneath the neglect, I saw potential. The bones of the building were solid, the location unbeatable. This wasn't a tear down, it was a sleeping giant waiting for someone to wake it up. At 2 o'clock, 83 employees gathered in the main ballroom. They slouched in chairs with the body language of people expecting another meaningless pep talk. I stood before them, abandoning the podium for the open floor. This hotel is dying. I began, watching them straighten at my bluntness. 20% occupancy is ICU numbers. You know it. I know it. The question is, do we pull the plug or perform a miracle? Silence greeted my words. Then from the back, a voice called out, "What's different about you? Why should we believe you'll stick around?" I found the speaker a maintenance worker whose coveralls bore years of honest work. Because I'm not here to manage decline. I'm here to build something extraordinary, and I can't do it without every single person in this room. For the next hour, I laid out my vision. The closed floors would become Miami's first hotel-integrated co-working spaces, targeting the explosion of remote workers seeking paradise with good Wi-Fi. The rooftop would transform into an Instagram destination with design elements that would make influence seekers line up for sunset shots. The pool area would host morning yoga afternoon, DJ sets, and evening wine tastings. We'd partner with local artists, musicians, and chefs to create experiences no algorithm could replicate. But here's the thing, I said, meeting eyes around the room. None of this works if you're not invested. So I'm asking, who wants to be part of the resurrection? The energy shifted like tide turning. Questions flew fast and specific. How would we fund renovations? What about our regular guests? How long before we'd see results? I answered honestly, admitting what I didn't know and promising to find out. When the meeting ended, something had changed. Not hope exactly, but curiosity. Maybe this new manager was different. The first month was combat. Every change met resistance, not from malice, but from exhaustion. The staff had been disappointed too many times to trust easily. I worked 18-hour days, personally helping housekeeping deep clean the presidential suite, joining maintenance to repair the neon sign, even manning the front desk during the night shift to understand traffic patterns. "You don't act like management," Rosa observed. She'd transferred from New York to be my head of housekeeping, bringing her no-nonsense efficiency to Miami. "You work like someone who's been where we are." "Because I have," I said, helping her reorganize the supply closets. The view from the bottom shows things the penthouse misses. Slowly, trust built. The staff began suggesting improvements, small at first, then bolder. Carlos proposed a partnership with local tour companies. The spa manager wanted to offer sunrise meditation on the beach. The chef, freed from the previous manager's micromanagement, developed a menu celebrating Miami's cultural fusion. But not everyone welcomed change. The assistant manager, Bradley Morrison, had expected to inherit the top position. He smiled to my face while sending emails to corporate questioning every decision. I documented his subtle sabotage schedules, mysteriously changed supplies, ordered incorrectly maintenance requests that vanished into digital ether. The situation exploded during our soft launch of the co-working spaces. I'd invited 50 local entrepreneurs and freelancers for a preview, complete with complimentary workspace trials and networking reception. The event should have run smoothly. I'd checked every detail twice. Instead, I arrived to find the air conditioning off in 90-degree heat, the Wi-Fi mysteriously down, and our catering order canceled. Bradley stood in the lobby, poorly concealing his satisfaction as I surveyed the disaster. "Such a shame," he said, voice dripping false sympathy. Perhaps we weren't ready for such ambitious plans. Fury burned through me, but I channeled it into action. Within 30 minutes, I had portable AC units running. Our IT team had the Wi-Fi restored through backup systems, and 3 food trucks were setting up a gourmet spread by the pool. The event pivoted from indoor networking to a tropical business mixer that had attendees raving about our flexibility and style. "How did you pull that off?" Carlos asked later, watching our future tenants sign up for memberships. "By remembering that problems are just opportunities in disguise," I said, but inside I knew Bradley had to go. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Our accounting noticed irregularities in the previous month's books. Supplies ordered but never delivered, maintenance contracts for services never performed. I dug deeper, following paper trails that led to shocking revelations. Bradley hadn't just been skimming. He'd been running an entire shadow operation using hotel resources for his own side business. Worse, the former manager had known and taken a cut. The corruption went back 2 years, explaining much of the property's decline. But the most shocking discovery came from an encrypted email folder. Bradley's partner in the scheme was my brother, Marcus. I stared at the screen, reading their exchanges about moving money through shell companies. Marcus, the golden child, the heir apparent, was stealing from a struggling hotel while his trust fund gathered interest. The betrayal felt different from my parents' rejection. This was greed, pure and simple. The smart move was to handle it quietly, protect the hotel's reputation while removing the cancer. But sometimes the smart move isn't the right one. I compiled the evidence into a comprehensive report and scheduled a meeting with Sarah Blackwood. She flew down from New York, arriving at the property as the sun painted the ocean gold. We sat on the renovated rooftop. Miami spread before us like a promise, while I laid out what I'd found. "Your brother is involved," she said, studying the documentation. "This complicates things." "No, it clarifies them. Bradley and Marcus committed fraud. The law doesn't care about family connections." Sarah's smile held pride and something else. "You're willing to pursue this, knowing it will make headlines." "I'm willing to do what's right." The staff here trusted me to fix this place. That includes removing anyone who steals from them. The police arrived the next morning. Bradley's arrest in the lobby sent shock waves through the property, but when I gathered the staff to explain what had happened, showing them the money that had been stolen from their potential bonuses and improvements, the shock transformed into rage, then determination. "We're taking back our hotel," I told them. "Every dollar recovered goes into making this the property you deserve to work at." Marcus's arrest came 2 days later, splashed across Miami society pages. My phone exploded with calls from numbers I'd blocked long ago. I ignored them all, focusing on the investigation and the hotel's continued transformation. The scandal, rather than destroying us, became rocket fuel. Local media picked up the story of a hotel fighting back against corruption. Guests booked rooms to support our stand. The co-working spaces filled with entrepreneurs who appreciated our transparency. But the real miracle was the staff. Freed from Bradley's toxic influence and inspired by justice being served, they transformed into a team. Ideas flowed like champagne at a wedding. The housekeeping staff suggested eco-friendly initiatives that reduced costs while attracting conscious travelers. The restaurant team created a Sunday jazz brunch that had lines around the block. The maintenance crew restored the Art Deco details that previous managers had wanted to modernize away. 6 months after my arrival, occupancy hit 60%. The rooftop bar was booked solid every weekend. The co-working spaces had a waiting list. Travel bloggers called us Miami's best-kept secret, though we weren't secret anymore. Sarah visited again, this time for our relaunch gala. The hotel gleamed with its original glamour restored and enhanced. Staff members wore their uniforms with pride. Guests couldn't stop photographing every corner, and the energy felt like pure electricity. 78% occupancy projected for next month. I reported as we stood on the balcony. Revenue up 300%. Staff turnover at historic lows. And Bradley pled guilty. He's cooperating with authorities about other properties he hit. Marcus, I paused, the family connection still tender. Marcus got 18 months. My parents hired the best lawyers, but the evidence was overwhelming. How do you feel about that? I considered the question while watching the ocean darken to midnight blue. Relieved that justice doesn't depend on last names. He made his choices. I've made mine. Sarah turned to face me fully. You've exceeded every expectation, Antonia. The board is impressed. I'm impressed, but this was just the beginning. Are you ready for what comes next? What comes next? Her smile promised adventures I couldn't yet imagine. Let's talk about making you the youngest VP in celestial history. And then perhaps we discuss what your grandmother really wanted for the Grand Wellington. The hotel lights reflected off the water like fallen stars. Somewhere in New York, my family was dealing with scandal and shame. But here in Miami, I'd built something they couldn't take away: success earned through sweat, integrity, and the radical belief that every person mattered. The celestial Miami Beach wasn't just alive again, it was thriving. The news of Marcus's arrest hit the hospitality world like a tsunami in a champagne flute. Wellington heir arrested for hotel fraud screamed from every trade publication. The New York Post ran a particularly vicious headline: "From penthouse to penitentiary hotel, princes fall from grace." I read them all in my Miami office, feeling the industry's attention shift to our property, like spotlights finding a stage. My phone, silent for 2 years, suddenly remembered my number. Relatives who'd ignored my existence left voicemails dripping with false concern. Society friends who dropped me like a hot towel now wanted to check in. I deleted them all, focusing on the reservation system, showing us at 92% occupancy for the weekend. The call I'd been expecting came on a Tuesday morning. My mother's number appeared on my screen like a warning sign. I let it ring through to voicemail, then listened to her message during my lunch break. Antonia, this vindictive crusade of yours has gone far enough. You've destroyed your brother's future over petty revenge. Call me immediately so we can discuss dropping these ridiculous charges. Her voice held the same commanding tone that once made me shrink into myself. Now it just sounded desperate. I deleted the message and went back to reviewing our latest guest satisfaction scores. 2 days later, she appeared in person. I was conducting a walkthrough with our new spa director when Carlos radioed from the front desk. "Marie, there's a Patricia Wellington here demanding to see you. She says she's your mother." My blood chilled, but my voice stayed steady. "Tell her she needs an appointment like everyone else. I'm booked through next week." She's making quite a scene. I could imagine it, Patricia Wellington dressed in designer armor, treating my staff like servants in her own home. Security can escort her out if she refuses to leave. 10 minutes later, I found her waiting in the lobby, flanked by 2 polite but firm security guards. She looked older than I remembered, her perfect facade cracking at the edges. When she saw me, her face cycled through emotions like a slot machine, shock, rage, then calculation. "You look different," she said, taking in my professional appearance. The designer suit was mine now, bought with earned money, tailored to my specifications rather than her demands. "I'm working, Patricia. Whatever you came to say can wait for a scheduled appointment." Using her first name landed like a slap. She drew herself up, clutching her purse like a shield. "Your brother is in prison because of you. Does that satisfy your need for attention?" The lobby had gone quiet, guests and staff pretending not to watch the drama unfolding. I stepped closer, lowering my voice to Arctic levels. "Marcus is in prison because he stole hundreds of thousands of dollars. Because he thought rules didn't apply to Wellingtons. You taught him that. Now he's learning otherwise. We gave you everything. You gave me nothing but expectations and disappointment. Now you're trespassing on private property. Leave voluntarily, or security will assist you." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. Then, with the dramatic flair she'd perfected over decades, she spun on her heel and marched out, but not before delivering a parting shot. "You'll regret this vendetta. The Wellington name still means something in this industry." "So does integrity," I called after her. "You should try it sometime." The confrontation energized rather than drained me. My staff who'd witnessed the exchange seemed to stand a little taller. Rosa cornered me later in the housekeeping office. "That took guts," she said, organizing tomorrow's schedules. "Not many people stand up to their mothers like that." She stopped being my mother when she chose reputation over relationship. I helped her sort through supply requests. Family isn't just blood, it's the people who support your growth, not stunt it. The Miami miracle continued to unfold. Our occupancy stabilized at 85%. The co-working spaces had tech startups fighting for residency. Food and Wine magazine featured our restaurant. But success in Miami was just the appetizer. Sarah had bigger plans. She summoned me to New York in December, sending the corporate jet like a golden chariot. I'd grown comfortable with business class. Private aviation felt surreal. The flight attendant knew my coffee order, the cabin smelled like leather and possibility, and the clouds looked different when you sailed above them in a $20 million aircraft. Celestial's headquarters had transformed since my last visit. The lobby displayed awards we'd won, including a prominent feature on the Miami property's resurrection. Staff members I'd never met knew my name, whispering about the miracle worker as I passed. The attention felt strange, but not unwelcome. Sarah's assistant, a sharp young man named David, escorted me to the boardroom instead of her office. "The full board wanted to meet you," he explained. "You've become something of a legend." The boardroom held 12 of hospitality's heaviest hitters. I recognized faces from Forbes covers and industry conferences. At the head sat Sarah, her silver hair catching the light like a crown. She gestured to an empty chair at her right hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "meet Antonia Marie Rodriguez, though some of you might remember her as Antonia Wellington." A few eyebrows rose at the revelation. I kept my expression neutral, meeting their evaluating gazes without flinching. As you know, Sarah continued, our Miami property was hemorrhaging money 18 months ago. Today, it's our most profitable location per square foot. The innovations Antonia introduced are being rolled out system-wide, but that's not why we're here. She clicked a remote, bringing up a presentation on the wall-mounted screen. Charts showed Celestial's growth trajectory with notable spikes wherever my projects appeared. The board leaned forward, interest sharpening. We're facing a crossroads, Sarah said. The luxury hotel market is evolving. Guests want more than thread counts and marble bathrooms. They want experiences, authenticity, innovation. They want what Antonia instinctively understands how to deliver. Board member Harrison Cross, whose hotel empire stretched across 3 continents, spoke up. You're proposing making her VP of operations at her age? I'm proposing we stop letting arbitrary numbers prevent us from recognizing excellence. Sarah's tone could have frozen mercury, unless someone has concerns about her performance rather than her birth date. The questioning began. For 2 hours, I fielded inquiries about everything from labor costs to brand positioning. They pressed hard testing for weakness, searching for the nepotism they assumed lurked beneath my success. But I had numbers, strategies, and results. More importantly, I had the confidence that comes from building something with your own hands. When they finally voted, it was unanimous. Congratulations, Vice President Rodriguez, Sarah said, shaking my hand while the board applauded. Your office is ready. Your first assignment is waiting. The office was 3 floors down from Sarah's, but might as well have been in the stratosphere compared to where I'd started. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Central Park like a painting. The desk was clean-lined and modern, the technology state-of-the-art. But what stopped me cold was the small frame photo on the bookshelf my grandmother at her college graduation, standing beside a young Sarah Blackwood. She'd be so proud, Sarah said from the doorway. Elizabeth always said the hospitality industry needed more women who understood service as strength, not servitude. Tell me about her. The real her, not the Society page version. Sarah settled into one of my new chairs, her expression growing distant. Your grandmother was brilliant. She designed the original Grand Wellington's layout, created their service standards, even named it. But in those days, wives were silent partners. Your grandfather took the credit, the meetings, the accolades. Elizabeth smiled and hosted charity galas, while her dreams gathered dust. But she had plans. Oh, she had plans, expansion strategies, innovation proposals, a complete restructuring that would have revolutionized luxury hospitality in the 60s. I have her notebooks, her sketches. She gave them to me before she died, said maybe someday they'd find the right hands. My throat tightened. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Because you needed to prove yourself without that shadow. Now you have. You're not succeeding because you're Elizabeth Wellington's granddaughter. You're succeeding because you're Antonia Rodriguez, who happens to carry her vision in your DNA. She stood, smoothing her skirt in a gesture I'd begun to recognize as preparation for revelation. Your first assignment as VP is analyzing acquisition targets. Several luxury properties are struggling. We have capital to invest. I want your recommendations on which ones we should pursue. Any particular markets? Her smile held mischief. Oh, I think you'll find some familiar names on the list, including a certain New York property that's been losing market share to innovative competitors. My heart stopped. The Grand Wellington, among others. Seems their recent scandal with their heir apparent has shaken investor confidence. Their occupancy is down 15%. Their restaurant lost its Michelin star. Such a shame when management rests on its laurels instead of reaching for new heights. She left me with a stack of financial reports and a future crackling with possibility. I spent the evening diving into the numbers, seeing the story they told. The Grand Wellington was bleeding slowly, a death by 1,000 paper cuts. Their rates remained high while service slipped. Their technology lagged decades behind. Their staff turnover had tripled since Marcus's arrest. But buried in the financials, I found something interesting. The investors weren't just nervous, they were actively shopping for buyers. Discreet inquiries had gone out to major chains, including Celestial. The asking price was ambitious, but not impossible, especially if they grew more desperate. I worked through the night building a preliminary analysis. By dawn, I had a plan that would have made my grandmother proud. It was ambitious, risky, and absolutely perfect. The industry awards came 3 months later, hospitality's biggest night where legends were made and careers celebrated. Celestial had booked 2 tables, and Sarah insisted I attend as her special guest. I'd grown comfortable in boardrooms, but this felt different. This was the social side of business, where my family name had once opened every door. I wore black, simple but flawlessly cut, with my grandmother's Art Deco bracelet as the only jewelry. The ballroom at the Hilton buzzed with familiar energy. I recognized faces from charity galas and holiday parties, people who'd known me as Robert Wellington's disappointing daughter. The reactions were priceless. Double takes, whispered conferences, the social arithmetic of trying to figure out how the disowned daughter had materialized at Celestial's power table. I smiled, nodded, and let them wonder. But the real shock came during the awards ceremony. Sarah hadn't mentioned Celestial was nominated for anything. So when they called my name for Innovator of the Year, I genuinely thought I'd misheard. Antonia Rodriguez, whose transformation of celestial Miami Beach represents everything our industry should aspire to: innovation, integrity, and inclusive leadership. The walk to the stage felt both endless and instant. Accepting the crystal trophy, I found my parents in the audience. They sat at the Grand Wellington's table, my father's face purple with rage, my mother's frozen in disbelief. Their golden boy was in prison, while their discarded daughter stood in the spotlight. "Thank you," I said into the microphone, my voice carrying across the silent room. "This award belongs to every housekeeper who suggested improvements, every maintenance worker who went above and beyond, every front desk clerk who chose excellence over ease. Success isn't built from the penthouse down. It's built from the foundation up by people who understand that true hospitality means serving others, not serving ego." I looked directly at my parents for the last line, and to anyone who's been told they don't belong in this industry because of their gender, their background, or their willingness to challenge the status quo, prove them wrong. Then build something better. The applause thundered through the ballroom. I left the stage, returned to my table, and didn't look back at the Grand Wellington section again. But I felt their eyes following me all night, calculating the cost of their assumptions. Later, at the after-party industry, leaders approached with congratulations and barely veiled job offers. I deflected them all, loyal to Celestial and Sarah's mentorship, but I listened to their gossip, particularly about the Grand Wellington struggles. "Robert's lost his touch," one CEO confided after his 3rd whiskey. "Still running things like it's 1980. My nephew stayed there last month, said the technology was embarrassing. No mobile check-in. No smart room, features nothing. Just old world stuffiness at new world prices." "I heard they're shopping for capital," another added. "Quietly, of course. Can't let the market know the crown jewel is tarnished." I filed every detail away, adding to my growing dossier. The opportunity was approaching like a slow-moving train. I just needed to position myself on the right track. That night, back in my apartment, I placed the award on my bookshelf beside my grandmother's photo. The crystal caught the city lights, refracting them into rainbows across my walls. Somewhere across town, my parents were probably dissecting the evening, raging about my audacity, planning their next move. They had no idea their next move had already been decided, not by them, but by the daughter they'd thrown away, who'd returned as someone they never expected their equal, soon to be their better. The game was just beginning, and I finally held cards worth playing. The January wind cut through Manhattan like accusations I wasn't ready to hear. I stood outside Celestial's newest property in Soho, watching crews install our signature modern art pieces, when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Congratulations on the award, Tony. We should catch up and Jay." Only one person had ever called me Tony. My stomach clenched as memories flooded back James Hartley, the man I'd once planned to marry who'd left me the day after my parents' disownment with the words, "I can't build a future with someone who has no foundation." I deleted the text and went back to work, but James, like a bad penny, had a way of turning up when least wanted. 2 weeks later, I saw him in person. The Hospitality Alliance was hosting a networking mixer at the St. Regis. Sarah insisted I attend, saying visibility was crucial for a new VP. I was deep in conversation with a boutique hotel owner from Seattle when a familiar voice made my skin crawl. "Antonia, my God, you look incredible." James stood there in a perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit, his sandy hair artfully tousled, that practiced smile revealing teeth that had definitely been whitened since our last encounter. He looked like success, wrapped in cologne, the kind of man who'd never missed a meal or questioned his worth. "James," I kept my tone professionally neutral. "I heard you were working in Boston." "Was. Just moved back to the city for an exciting opportunity." His eyes traveled over me with an appraisal that felt like being inventoried. "VP at Celestial. That's quite a climb from being a maid?" I finished watching him flinch at my directness. "Yes, it is. Amazing what you can accomplish when you're not waiting for someone else's foundation to build on." He had the grace to look slightly ashamed. I deserved that. I handled things badly back then. I was young, stupid, influenced by your parents' threat to cut you off if you stayed with me. I smiled without warmth. "Water under the bridge, James. Enjoy the mixer." I turned to leave, but his hand caught my elbow. The touch sent revulsion through me instead of the electricity it once carried. "Wait, I need to tell you something about my new position." Something in his tone made me pause. "What about it?" "I'm the new GM at the Grand Wellington. Your parents hired me last week." The room seemed to tilt. Of all the hotels in New York, of all the positions he could have taken, James was now working for my family. The timing wasn't coincidence. Nothing with the Wellingtons ever was. Congratulations." I managed removing my arm from his grip. "I'm sure you'll fit right in." "Tony, I didn't know they were going to—" "Don't," I cut him off. "Whatever game you're playing, I'm not interested. Excuse me." I left him standing there and found Sarah by the bar. One look at my face and she guided me to a quiet corner. "What happened?" "James Hartley is the Grand Wellington's new GM. I accepted the whiskey she handed me. "My ex-fiancé is now working for my parents." Sarah's expression hardened. "The timing is suspicious." "Everything about this is suspicious. James doesn't make moves without calculating the angles. He's there for a reason." "Then we need to find out what that reason is." She studied the crowd over her glass. "Keep your distance, but stay alert. Information has a way of traveling in this industry." She was right. Over the next month, information trickled in through various channels. James was implementing changes at the Grand Wellington, trying to modernize their approach. He'd hired a social media manager, updated some of the technology, even attempted to poach several Celestial employees with inflated offers. But the most interesting intelligence came from Rosa's cousin, who worked in the Grand Wellington's housekeeping department. According to her, James spent a lot of closed-door meetings with my mother sessions that went well beyond normal GM reporting. "They're planning something," Rosa told me during one of our coffee breaks. "Maria says your mother visits his office daily, and last week she saw blueprints that looked just like your Miami innovations." The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. They were going to steal my concepts, implement them at the Grand Wellington, and claim innovation. It was corporate espionage dressed up as business strategy, with my ex-fiancé as the willing accomplice. I started documenting everything, creating a paper trail of our innovations, their dates of implementation, and any proprietary information. Sarah approved additional security measures for our internal documents, but we both knew the real threat wasn't just theft of ideas. It was the personal warfare my family was willing to wage. The attack came from an unexpected angle. I was reviewing contracts in my office when David knocked urgently. "You need to see this," he said, pulling up the New York Post's website. The headline screamed, "Hospitality's prodigal daughter, mental health concerns surround Celestial's youngest VP." The article byline to a gossip columnist who specialized in society takedowns painted me as unstable, vindictive, and possibly delusional. Anonymous sources claimed I'd been exhibiting erratic behavior and making paranoid accusations about former employers. But the worst part was the photos. Someone had taken pictures of me during my hardest days working housekeeping at 3 a.m, looking exhausted and unkempt. They'd twisted the narrative, suggesting I'd had a mental breakdown after being righteously removed from my family for unstable behavior. My hands shook as I read. Every paragraph dripped poison designed to undermine my credibility and paint my success as a fluke or worse, a danger to Celestial. "The timing," Sarah said, appearing in my doorway. "Right when we're in negotiations for the Singapore property, they're trying to make the board nervous." "It's working." Harrison Cross's assistant had already called twice. Other board members were concerned. The Singapore sellers had questions about Celestial's leadership stability. I wanted to curl up and disappear. Instead, I straightened my spine and looked at Sarah. "What do we do?" "We fight back with truth, but first we need to know exactly how deep this goes." The investigation revealed the rot's extent. The gossip columnist had recently vacationed at the Grand Wellington, comped entirely. The anonymous sources tracked back to IP addresses registered to Wellington properties. And the photos, they'd come from James's personal cloud storage pictures he'd apparently taken while we were dating, saved for just such an occasion. But we found something else in our digging. James hadn't just been meeting with my mother. He'd been accessing our internal systems using credentials from a Celestial employee who'd recently resigned for personal reasons. Further investigation revealed this employee had received a significant payout from an offshore account linked to Wellington Holdings. Corporate espionage. Celestial's legal counsel confirmed. Theft of trade secrets, defamation. We have grounds for serious action. While the lawyers prepared our response, I faced the harder battle, continuing to lead while feeling exposed and raw. Every meeting felt like walking into an ambush. Every whispered conversation might be about me. The confidence I'd built through years of hard work trembled under the weight of public humiliation. Sarah found me one evening on the roof garden of our building, staring at the city lights. "You know what your grandmother told me once?" she said, joining me at the railing. "She said the Wellington men always underestimated women because they mistook kindness for weakness and emotional intelligence for instability. Don't let them make you doubt what you've built." "They're using my past against me, making my work ethic look like mental illness." "Then we'll use their present against them. The press loves a corporate espionage story more than recycled gossip." She turned to face me. "But first, we need concrete evidence of what James has stolen." The opportunity came sooner than expected. A manager at our Boston property called with strange news. James had reached out to him, suggesting a confidential meeting about future opportunities. The manager, loyal to Celestial, agreed to meet while wearing a wire. The recording was damning. James outlined his plan to replicate Celestial's innovations across Wellington properties, taking credit for ideas he'd stolen. He offered our manager double his salary to jump ship and bring proprietary information with him. Most shocking was his casual admission, "Patricia Wellington wants her daughter's entire playbook. Every innovation, every strategy. She says Antonia owes the family that much for the embarrassment she's caused." We had him, but I wanted more than just to stop the theft. I wanted them to understand the consequences of underestimating me. Working with Sarah and legal, we crafted a trap. We fed false information through channels we knew were compromised plans for a revolutionary loyalty program that was complex, expensive, and ultimately flawed. We watched as James took the bait, presenting his idea to the Wellington board with great fanfare. Meanwhile, we prepared our real response. Sarah scheduled a press conference ostensibly to announce our Singapore acquisition. The business media showed up in force, eager for news about Celestial's expansion. Sarah spoke first about Singapore, then turned the podium over to me. I faced the cameras, my grandmother's bracelet catching the light, and dropped our bombshell. Before taking questions about our expansion, I need to address recent false allegations about my mental health and stability. These defamatory claims were planted by individuals engaged in corporate espionage against Celestial Hotels. I clicked the remote displaying evidence on the screen behind me. We have proof of systematic theft of trade secrets, including recordings of individuals attempting to bribe our employees. The room exploded with questions. I answered them calmly, presenting fact after fact. The gossip story evaporated. Under the weight of real news, established hotel dynasty caught stealing from innovative competitor. "Are you suggesting the Grand Wellington is behind this?" a reporter asked. "I'm stating that their new general manager, James Hartley, has been recorded attempting to steal proprietary information. What's particularly interesting," I added, letting steel enter my voice, "is that Mr. Hartley previously had access to my personal photos through our former relationship, which he appears to have weaponized for corporate gain." The story dominated business news for days. The Wellington stock price dropped 12%. 3 board members called for an investigation. James was suspended pending review, his career in luxury hospitality effectively over. But the sweetest vindication came in a private moment. I was working late when security called up. "Ms. Rodriguez, there's a James Hartley here. He says it's urgent." I almost refused, then curiosity won. "Send him up with security escort." He arrived looking haggard, his perfect facade cracked. Gone was the confident man from the mixer. This was someone watching his world collapse. "I need you to know I didn't want it to go this far," he began. "Save it." I didn't offer him a seat. "You made your choices. First, when you left me for losing my trust fund. Again, when you took their job. And finally, when you tried to destroy everything I've built." "Your mother," she promised. "Promised what money position?" "Everything you thought you'd lost when you left me." I laughed, but it held no humor. "You had my love, James, real love, and you traded it for the promise of wealth. How's that working out?" His shoulders slumped. "I'm finished. No hotel will hire me after this." "Probably not." I moved to my desk, creating distance. "But that's not my problem. You made your bed with Egyptian cotton sheets and Wellington monograms. Now, lie in it." "I loved you," he said quietly. "I just loved security more." "No, you loved the idea of security, the guarantee of success without effort. But here's what you never understood. Real security comes from building something yourself, not from attaching to someone else's foundation." Security arrived to escort him out. I never saw him again, though I heard he left hospitality entirely, taking a job selling real estate in Florida, a fitting end for someone who'd confused appearance with substance. The investigation into the Grand Wellington continued. More evidence emerged of systematic attempts to undermine Celestial, all traceable to Patricia Wellington's direct orders. The board forced her to step back from operations, a humiliation that probably stung worse than any financial loss. Sarah found me in my office the night the news broke, working on legitimate plans for our Singapore property. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Vindicated. Tired. Ready to focus on building rather than defending." I saved my work and leaned back. "They wanted war. We gave them consequences." "Your grandmother would be proud. You fought with intelligence, not just emotion." "What happens now?" Sarah's smile held promise. "Now we execute the real plan. The Wellingtons are weakened, distracted, dealing with internal strife. Their investors are nervous. Their brand is tarnished. She placed a folder on my desk. It's time to make our move. I opened it to find updated financials on the Grand Wellington. The numbers were worse than before, the stock price reflecting public embarrassment and board uncertainty. An acquisition target, if I'd ever seen one. You think they'd sell to us? Not to us directly, but to the right shell company with the right offer at the right moment of desperation. Sarah's eyes gleamed. Money has no memory, Antonia. It only remembers profit. The betrayal had hurt. The public attack had wounded, but like all storms it had passed, leaving clear skies and better visibility. The Grand Wellington had played their card, shown their hand, and lost. Now it was my turn to deal. The cherry blossoms were blooming in Central Park when Sarah first collapsed. It was subtle, just a momentary sway during our Monday morning meeting, her hand gripping the conference table until her knuckles went white. When I started to rise, concerned, she waved me back to my seat with characteristic firmness. Just stood up too quickly, she said, but her usually bronze complexion had taken on an ashen undertone. I didn't believe her, but Sarah Blackwood wasn't someone you questioned about personal matters. She'd mentored me, defended me, given me opportunities beyond my wildest dreams, yet maintained professional boundaries that felt like walls of steel. So I pretended to accept her explanation and continued our discussion about the Singapore property. But over the following weeks, the signs multiplied. The brief moments where pain flickered across her features. The way she scheduled fewer in-person meetings, conducting more business by phone. The pill she thought I didn't notice her taking with increasing frequency. The woman who'd once worked 18-hour days now left the office by 6, claiming a newfound interest in work-life balance that fooled no one who knew her. The truth came out on a rain-soaked Thursday in April. I'd stopped by her office with quarterly reports that couldn't wait for our postponed meeting. Her assistant's desk sat empty, and Sarah's door was slightly open. I knocked gently. "Come in," her voice called, lacking its usual command. I found her sitting on her office couch rather than behind her desk, papers spread across the coffee table, a blanket draped over her legs, despite the warm spring day. She looked smaller somehow, as if gravity had increased its hold while no one was watching. "We need to talk," she said, patting the space beside her. "Sit." The reports suddenly seemed trivial. I placed them on the table and took the offered seat, waiting. "I have pancreatic cancer," she said without preamble. "Stage 4, diagnosed 3 months ago." The words hit like physical blows. I opened my mouth closed. It searched for something meaningful to say and found only hollow platitudes waiting. Sarah saved me from empty comfort. "The doctors give me 6 months, maybe 8 if I'm lucky. I intend to use them wisely." She reached for a leather portfolio I hadn't noticed before. "Which brings us to succession." "Sarah." My throat constricted around her name. "No tears," she commanded, though her own eyes showed suspicious brightness. "We have work to do. The board will need to appoint my replacement, and they're going to fight you." "Fight me?" The implication registered slowly. "You want me to become CEO of Celestial Hotels? Yes, you're ready. More importantly, you're right for it. But being ready and being accepted are different battles." She opened the portfolio, revealing documents and strategies. "Harrison Cross leads the old guard. They'll want someone traditional, someone who thinks profit margins are the only metric that matters. Someone unlike you." I stared at the papers, seeing succession plans, board member profiles, voting histories. Sarah had been preparing for this moment with the same meticulous attention she brought to everything. "There must be treatments," I said, still grappling with the impossibility of losing her. "Clinical trials, alternative medicine, something." "I've explored everything, spent a fortune on second opinions that all reached the same conclusion." She touched my hand briefly, the most personal gesture she'd ever made. "This isn't a battle I can win, Antonia. But ensuring Celestial's future, that's a war worth fighting. We spent the next 3 hours reviewing her plans. She'd identified potential allies on the board, outlined strategies for winning over skeptics, even scripted responses to likely objections. But underneath the business discussion lay an unbearable truth, my mentor, my champion, the woman who'd given me a chance when everyone else had written me off was dying. "There's something else, Jaida," she said as the afternoon sun broke through the rain clouds. "Something I've been waiting for the right moment to share." She pulled a manila envelope from beneath the cushions, its edges soft with age. "Your grandmother gave this to me the week before she died. She made me promise to hold it until her granddaughter was ready. Not just successful, but ready." Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in my grandmother's distinctive handwriting. My hands trembled as I read. "My dearest granddaughter, if you're reading this, it means you've become who I always knew you could be. The Grand Wellington was never just a hotel. It was my dream, made tangible, then stolen through legal machinations I was too trusting to prevent. Your grandfather convinced me to sign papers. I didn't fully understand papers that gave him sole ownership of what we'd built together. By the time I realized the betrayal, it was too late. The lawyers said I had no recourse. A wife's signature was binding even if obtained through deception. I've included the original partnership documents, proof that the Grand Wellington was founded with my inheritance, my vision, my sweat. I doubt they'll hold up in court after all these years, but truth has its own power. Use this wisely, my dear one. Not for revenge, but for justice. Build something greater than what was stolen. Prove that a Wellington woman's legacy can't be erased, only delayed. All my love, Grandmother Elizabeth." Beneath her letter were yellowed documents, incorporation papers showing Elizabeth Wellington as the original founder, architectural sketches in her hand, even bank records proving the initial investment came from her family trust. The truth laid bare the Grand Wellington's origin story was built on a lie. "She knew even then that you'd be the one," Sarah said softly. 12 years old, and Elizabeth could see what your parents couldn't or wouldn't. You've had this all along, waiting for the right moment, when you'd built enough of your own success that this would be a tool, not a crutch." She leaned back, exhaustion evident. "The question is, what will you do with it?" I stared at the papers, feeling the weight of generations. "First, I'm going to ensure you get the best care possible. Then, we're going to secure Celestial's future. And then," I met her eyes, "then I'm going to reclaim what was stolen not just from me, but from her." Sarah smiled, the expression transforming her tired features. "Good, but we need to move fast. The board meets in 2 months for mid-year reviews. That's when they'll want to discuss succession planning. You need to prove yourself indispensable before then." The next weeks blurred into a campaign of strategic brilliance. By day, I executed every aspect of my VP role, flawlessly exceeding projections and launching new initiatives that had the business press singing Celestial's praises. By night, I studied board dynamics with the intensity of a general planning a siege. Sarah, despite her declining health, orchestrated from behind the scenes. She arranged casual lunches between me and fence-sitting board members where I could demonstrate my vision without seeming to campaign. She leaked selective information about our competitors' struggles, highlighting how my innovations had positioned Celestial ahead of market trends. Most cleverly, she had me present the Singapore acquisition plans to the full board, letting them see my leadership directly. But the real test came during an emergency that nobody could have planned. Our flagship Boston property suffered a catastrophic system failure. A perfect storm of crashed booking systems, failed air conditioning, and a water main break that flooded 2 floors. The general manager panicked, the staff was overwhelmed, and we had 3 conferences worth of VIP guests arriving within hours. Sarah was at a chemotherapy appointment. The other VPs were traveling, The crisis landed squarely on my desk at 7 on a Friday morning. I didn't hesitate. Within minutes, I was coordinating a response that would have made military strategists proud. I redirected incoming guests to our other properties, personally calling CEOs to apologize and offer upgrades. I negotiated with competitor hotels to temporarily house overflow, protecting our reputation even at premium costs. I had IT working with outside consultants to restore systems while maintenance crews worked around the clock. Most importantly, I flew to Boston myself, spending 36 straight hours on site. I helped housekeeping, prepare alternative rooms, stood at the front desk, personally checking in guests, even rolled up my sleeves to help the kitchen staff when the dinner rush threatened to overwhelm our reduced capacity. A guest snapped a photo of me in a borrowed housekeeping uniform, helping clean a room for an elderly couple whose anniversary trip had been disrupted. The image went viral with the caption, "This is what leadership looks like." By Sunday night, the crisis was contained. Systems restored guests' accommodated reputation, not just maintained, but enhanced. The social media buzz praised Celestial's response with several articles highlighting how our VP had personally ensured every guest was cared for. Harrison Cross called me Monday morning. "That was impressive work in Boston," he said, grudging respect evident. "Sarah's trained you well." "Sarah gave me opportunities," I corrected, "but she's not the one who spent the weekend mopping floors and apologizing to guests. Leaders lead from the front, Mr. Cross. That's what Celestial needs." His chuckle surprised me. "Point taken. You've got grit, Ms. Rodriguez," the board noticed. But my growing support couldn't stop Sarah's decline. She insisted on attending the June board meeting, despite barely being able to stand. I watched her grip the podium, delivering her vision for the Celestial's future with passion that defied her body's betrayal. "This company needs leadership that understands service, not just spreadsheets," she declared, her eyes finding each board member in turn. "Leadership that will get their hands dirty when necessary, that sees employees as assets rather than expenses, that builds for tomorrow rather than quarterly reports." She didn't name me, but everyone knew who she meant. When she faltered at the end, I was there to steady her, our united front speaking louder than words. After the meeting, as I helped her to her office, she pressed something into my hand, a key. "Safety deposit box at Chase on 57th. She wheezed each word in effort. "Everything you need is there, including some surprises about Wellington finances that my lawyers found quite interesting." "Sarah, please, save your strength. No time left to save." She gripped my arm with surprising force. "Promise me something. When you take over, don't just run Celestial. Transform it. Make it what your grandmother would have built if she'd had the chance. When you get better..." "Antonia." Her voice cut through my denial. "We both know I won't, but what we've built together will outlive us both. Promise me." "I promise." She smiled, then peace settling over her features. "Good. Now help me to my couch. If I'm going to collapse, I'd prefer to do it with dignity." 2 days later, she collapsed again during a video conference with our London team. This time, she didn't wave off assistance. The ambulance took her to Mount Sinai, where doctors confirmed what we'd both known: the end was approaching faster than predicted. I spent every moment I could at her bedside, bringing work to the hospital, reading her reports when she was too weak to focus on the pages herself. We planned Celestial's future between morphine doses and whispered conversations. "The envelope," she said one evening as Manhattan glittered beyond her hospital window. "Have you opened it?" I'd been so focused on her health and the succession battle that I'd forgotten about the safety deposit box. "Not yet." "Do it tonight. The board meets again in 10 days. You'll need everything inside." She closed her eyes, gathering strength. "And Antonia, your parents don't know about the shell companies. They have no idea who's been buying their shares." My heart stopped. "Sarah, what did you do?" But she drifted into medicated sleep, a slight smile playing on her lips. I sat there until visiting hours ended, holding her hand and feeling the weight of secrets yet to be revealed. That night, I opened the safety deposit box. Inside were documents that took my breath away. Sarah hadn't just been buying Grand Wellington shares, she'd been systematically acquiring them through a web of shell companies for over a decade. Together with institutional investors she'd cultivated relationships with, she controlled nearly 30% of the Wellington holdings. Not enough for a takeover, but more than enough to demand changes, especially with the company weakened by scandal and declining revenues. The final document was a letter in Sarah's handwritings. My dear Antonia, your grandmother was my dearest friend and the smartest woman I've ever known. When your parents cast you out, they repeated history's cruelest pattern, underestimating a Wellington woman. I've spent years preparing for this moment, when you would be ready not just to reclaim what was stolen, but to transform it into something greater. The shares are held in trust, waiting for the right moment. Use them wisely, not for destruction, but for construction. Build the legacy Elizabeth dreamed of, the one you've already begun at Celestial. And remember, the best revenge isn't tearing down what others built. It's building something so magnificent that their constructions pale in comparison. With love and infinite faith in your future, Sarah. I sat in my apartment surrounded by evidence of Sarah's long game, understanding finally why she'd pushed so hard for my success. She wasn't just mentoring me, she was preparing me for a battle she'd been fighting in the shadows for years. The board meeting loomed. Sarah grew weaker. And somewhere across the city, my parents slept soundly, unaware that their empire's foundation had been quietly eroding for over a decade. The revolution Sarah had started was about to accelerate, and I was no longer just a discarded daughter seeking vindication. I was my grandmother's heir, Sarah's chosen successor, and perhaps, most dangerously for those who'd underestimated me, I was ready. The morning after opening Sarah's safety deposit box, I sat in my office as dawn painted Manhattan in shades of gold and shadow. The documents spread before me told a story of patience and strategy that spanned years. Sarah hadn't just been collecting shares. She'd been building a chessboard where every piece was positioned for maximum impact. The shell companies had names that meant nothing to outsiders: Sunrise, Hospitality Ventures, Eastern Crown Holdings, Meridian Investment Trust. But traced through the paperwork, they all led back to accounts Sarah controlled. She'd started buying when Grand Wellington stock dipped after the 2008 financial crisis, accumulating slowly, never enough to trigger disclosure requirements. I spent the morning with Celestial's legal team validating every document. Our head counsel, Margaret Chen, whistled low when she saw the full scope. "This is masterful," she said, adjusting her reading glasses. "Completely legal, brilliantly executed. Sarah must have been planning this for over a decade." "Can they challenge it?" "They can try, but these purchases were made on the open market following every regulation. The shell companies are properly registered, taxes paid, all above board." She tapped one particular document. "This is especially interesting. See this clause. Sarah included provisions that these shares can only be voted as a block and only by the designated trustee." "Who's the trustee?" Margaret smiled. "Take a guess." My phone rang before I could process the full implications. The hospital? Sarah had taken a turn for the worse. I found her barely conscious machines monitoring every failing system. The private room smelled of antiseptic and endings. Her assistant David sat vigil, eyes red with unshed tears. "She was asking for you," he whispered. I took her hand, feeling bones beneath tissue paper skin. Her eyes fluttered open, still sharp despite the morphine haze. "Did you find them?" Her voice was barely audible. "All of them. Sarah, what you've built. What we've built." She squeezed my hand with ghost strength. "The board meets Thursday. Harrison Cross will challenge you. He has support from old guard members who think tradition matters more than innovation." "I'll be ready." There's more. She gestured weakly toward David, who produced another envelope from his briefcase. Insurance policy, only if necessary. I took the sealed envelope, noting her shaky handwriting for Antonia, nuclear option. What is this? Proof that Harrison Cross has been taking kickbacks from vendors for years. Small amounts carefully hidden but consistent. Her breathing grew labored. I hoped we'd never need it, but if he tries to destroy you? You've thought of everything. No. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't think I'd run out of time so soon. There's still so much to teach you. You've taught me enough. How to see potential where others see problems. How to build rather than tear down. How to lead with strength and compassion. My own tears fell freely now. You gave me a chance when no one else would. That's not something that ends. She smiled, then peace settling over her features. We sat in silence, her breathing becoming shallower, the monitors beeping their electronic requiem. She lasted until evening, waiting until David and I were both present before letting go. Her final words were typically, "Sarah, build something magnificent." The funeral was held on a Tuesday that felt too beautiful for grief. The hospitality industry turned out in force, filling the cathedral with figures who'd shaped modern luxury travel. I delivered the eulogy, speaking about legacy and vision, while avoiding the secret she'd entrusted to me. My parents sat in the 5th row, their presence a reminder that battles remained even in mourning. Afterward, at the reception, Sarah had planned herself with typical attention to detail. Industry leaders approached with condolences and careful questions about Celestial's future. I navigated their inquiries with the diplomatic skills she'd taught me, revealing nothing while maintaining relationships. Harrison Cross cornered me near the bar, his silver eyebrows drawn together in what he probably thought was paternal concern. "Difficult loss?" he said, though his tone suggested opportunity rather than sympathy. "Sarah was irreplaceable." "Her vision will continue," I replied, accepting the whiskey he offered without drinking it. "Through you?" He didn't bother hiding his skepticism. "You're talented, Antonia, but CEO of a company this size, you're what, 31, 32, and age didn't stop technology founders from building trillion-dollar companies. This isn't Silicon Valley. Hospitality is about relationships, tradition, trust built over decades." "It's about adaptation," I countered. "The industry is changing. Guests expect innovation, personalization experiences that traditional approaches can't deliver. Celestial needs leadership that understands tomorrow, not just yesterday." His smile was condescending. "We'll see what the board thinks. Thursday should be interesting." After he left, David appeared at my elbow. He's been lobbying members all week. Promises of stability, steady returns, no radical changes. "How many does he have?" 4 solid, 2 leaning his way. You have 3 confirmed supporters, 2 considering. That leaves 3 swing votes. Not enough. I needed 7 of 12 for a majority. The math was stark and unforgiving. That night, I returned to my office and opened the nuclear option envelope. Inside were bank records, emails, photographs of Cross, meeting with vendors in locations far from business conferences. The amounts were small, 5,000 here, 10,000 there, but over 15 years, they added up to nearly $500,000 in unreported income. It was enough to destroy him, but using it would mark me as someone who played dirty when cornered. Sarah had given me a weapon. Wisdom lay in knowing when not to use it. Instead, I spent Wednesday crafting a different strategy. If Cross wanted to focus on tradition and stability, I'd show the board what innovation could achieve. I compiled a presentation that wasn't just about Celestial's future, but about the industry's survival. Thursday arrived with summer storm clouds that matched the boardroom's atmosphere. I entered to find members already seated, their expressions ranging from supportive to skeptical. Cross held court at the far end, radiating confidence. "Well, let's begin," said Andrea Walsh, the lead independent director. As you know, with Sarah's passing, we need to discuss succession planning for the CEO position. Cross didn't wait. I propose we conduct a thorough external search. Celestial deserves experienced leadership, someone with decades of proven success. While we all appreciate Ms. Rodriguez's contributions, the CEO role requires more than operational excellence. I agree about the importance of experience, said Thomas Kim, one of my supporters, which is why Antonia's track record speaks volumes. Miami-Boston crisis management, Singapore acquisition all showcase leadership beyond her years. The debate began, board members aligning along predictable lines. I waited Sarah's training echoing in my mind, let them exhaust themselves with words, then show them vision. When Andrea finally turned to me, I stood and activated the presentation screen. Ladies and gentlemen, we're not just choosing Celestial's next CEO, we're choosing our industry's future. The first slide showed market disruption trends. In 5 years, 70% of luxury travelers will be millennials and Gen Zs. They don't want marble lobbies and thread counts. They want experiences, authenticity, sustainability, technology that enhances rather than intrudes. I walked them through my vision hotels as community hubs, AI-powered personalization that felt human rather than robotic sustainability initiatives that saved money while saving the planet, employee programs that turned staff into brand ambassadors. But vision without execution is hallucination. I continued showing Miami's numbers, Boston's crisis resolution innovations already rolling out across properties. Everything I'm proposing has been tested, proven, and profitable. Cross interrupted. Profitable in the short term, but what about relationships, vendor partnerships, the delicate negotiations that keep a company like Celestial running smoothly? I smiled, having expected this. You mean relationships like our linen supplier who's overcharged us by 12% for 3 years, or partnerships like our technology vendor who hasn't updated their systems since 2015? I've already renegotiated both contracts, saving us $4 million annually while improving service quality. His face flushed. You can't just steamroll through established relationships. I don't steamroll, Mr. Cross. I optimize. And speaking of relationships, I clicked to a new slide showing letters of support from major hospitality figures, including several of Cross's supposed allies. The industry seems ready for change. The room shifted. Board members who'd been leaning his way suddenly looked thoughtful. Andrea Walsh leaned forward. What about stability? Sarah's death has already created uncertainty. This was my moment. Sarah anticipated that concern. She spent years ensuring Celestial's foundation was unshakable. I paused, meeting each board member's eyes. She also made provisions for continuity that go beyond any individual. I couldn't reveal the share accumulation yet, but the hint was enough. Several members exchanged glances, wondering what Sarah had arranged. The vote when it came was closer than I'd hoped, but decisive enough. 7 for me, 4 for an external search, 1 abstention. Cross's expression as he realized he'd lost would have been satisfying if I'd had energy for petty emotions. Congratulations, CEO Rodriguez. Andrea said, though her tone suggested the victory was provisional. We'll announce Monday, giving markets time to digest the news. I trust you'll be ready. I've been ready since the day Sarah Blackwood gave me a chance. As the board filed out, Cross lingered. You think you've won, but running a company isn't about presentations and promises. When you fail, and you will fail, remember that experience matters more than ambition. I let him have the last word. Sarah had taught me that sometimes tactical losses led to strategic wins. Cross would likely cause trouble, but I had bigger challenges ahead. That evening, I sat in Sarah's former office, now mine, watching the city lights twinkle like earthbound constellations. The desk still smelled faintly of her perfume, and I'd kept her photo of my grandmother on the shelf. David knocked, entering with champagne and 2 glasses. She'd be proud, he said simply. She'd be planning the next move. I corrected, though I accepted the toast. This was just the first battle. What comes next? I looked at the locked drawer where I'd placed the Grand Wellington documentation. My parents still had no idea their former maid owned pieces of their empire, that their dismissal had created their greatest threat. Next, we make Celestial untouchable. Then, I raised my glass to Sarah's photo. Then, we honor promises to women who deserved better than the hands they were dealt. The champagne tasted like possibility. Outside Manhattan hummed with 8 million dreams. Inside, I held secrets that would reshape the industry's landscape. The envelope had contained more than evidence. It had held trust, accumulated power, and the tools for transformation. Sarah was gone, but her strategic genius lived on in documents and shares in lessons learned and alliances built. CEO at 32. It would have been impossible without her, but now with everything she'd prepared, impossible was just another word for opportunity. The real game was just beginning. The lawsuit arrived on a Tuesday morning that had started with such promise. I'd been CEO for exactly 3 weeks, navigating the transition with the grace Sarah had taught me while implementing changes at velocity that made board members nervous. Then Margaret Chen walked into my office with an expression that could freeze champagne. "We have a problem," she said, placing a thick legal document on my desk. "Your parents are suing." I set down my coffee, carefully kneading both hands steady to read. The filing was comprehensive theft of trade secrets, corporate espionage, breach of fiduciary duty, and a dozen other claims designed to bury both Celestial and me under legal avalanche. They're alleging I stole proprietary information during my time at the Grand Wellington and used it to benefit Celestial. I summarized speed reading through legalese. They want damages of $50 million and an injunction preventing me from serving as CEO. That's not the worst part. Margaret flipped to a tabbed section. They've included affidavits from former employees claiming you exhibited unstable behavior, that Sarah Blackwood took advantage of your mental state for corporate gain. The words blurred as rage and disbelief battled for dominance. They were using Sarah's death, twisting our relationship into something exploitative, painting me as a puppet and her as a manipulator. "This is coordinated with the press release," David said, rushing in with his tablet. "Times, Journal, every major outlet just got the story. They're framing it as established hospitality defending itself against unethical competition." Within hours, the narrative exploded across business media. My phone buzzed incessantly, with reporters seeking comments, board members expressing concern, competitors smelling blood in the water. Celestial's stock dropped 8% by market close. That evening, I assembled our war council: Margaret Chen, our PR chief, Rebecca Martinez, David, and our CFO, James Liu. The conference room felt like a bunker as we strategized our response. "They've hired Kirkland and Sterling," Margaret reported, "best corporate litigation firm in the city. This isn't a nuisance suit. They're going for the jugular." "Can they actually prevent me from serving as CEO?" I asked. "Legally, no, but they can make it so expensive and distracting that the board reconsiders your position. Death by 1,000 paper cuts." Rebecca pulled up social media metrics. The online reaction is mixed. Some see it as David versus Goliath. Others wonder if there's merit to the claims. We need to control the narrative quickly. "No." I stood pacing to the window. "We're not going to play defense. Sarah didn't spend years preparing for me to cower at the first legal threat." "What are you proposing?" James asked nervously. "We countersue. Defamation, tortious interference with business relations, abuse of process." I turned back to face them. "And we subpoena their financial records as part of discovery." Margaret's eyes widened with understanding. "The shell companies, they don't know about your share ownership." "Exactly. They think this is about destroying a competitor. They have no idea they're attacking a major shareholder." I smiled, feeling Sarah's strategic influence. Let's show them the price of underestimating Wellington women. The next weeks were brutal. Depositions, motions, emergency board meetings where Harrison Cross pushed for my suspension until the legal matters resolved. I fought on multiple fronts running Celestial while battling lawyers who twisted every achievement into evidence of corporate theft. The deposition was particularly grueling. Across a polished conference table, my father's legal team tried to break me down over 12 hours of questioning. Isn't it true that you had access to proprietary Wellington information during your childhood? Their lead attorney pressed. I had access to my home, I responded calmly. If my parents discussed business at dinner, that hardly constitutes corporate espionage by a teenager. But you used that knowledge later, didn't you? When you worked for our competitor, I used publicly available information and my own innovations. Unless you're claiming the Grand Wellington invented customer service? The lawyer's jaw tightened. You were seen taking photos in the hotel shortly before your departure from the family. I was documenting memories of my childhood home before being banned from it. Sentimental value, not corporate intelligence. Round after round, they tried to trap me in contradictions or admissions. But Sarah had prepared me for harder battles than this. I gave them nothing while learning everything about their strategy. The turning point came through an unexpected source. Rosa's cousin Maria, still working at the Grand Wellington, reached out through careful channels. The staff was furious about the lawsuit, seeing it as an attack on one of their own who'd made good. They began documenting every operational failure, every cut corner, every decision that prioritized profit over people. You gave us hope, Maria told me during a clandestine meeting. Showed us that hard work could lead somewhere. They're trying to destroy that. The documentation she provided was damning. While suing me for theft of innovations, the Grand Wellington had cut training programs, eliminated employee benefits, and raised prices while reducing service quality. Their occupancy continued dropping, now below 60%. But the real bombshell came from our discovery process. As a major shareholder through the shell companies, I had rights to financial information they couldn't legally hide. What we found exceeded our wildest expectations. They're bleeding money, James Liu reported during an emergency strategy session. Not just from operations, but from questionable investments, inflated executive compensation, and what looks suspiciously like related party transactions. Margaret studied the documents. Robert Wellington has been paying himself and the board bonuses while laying off staff. Patricia Wellington's event planning company has exclusive contracts at rates 40% above market. That's shareholders' money they're wasting, I said quietly, including mine. 28.7% worth, David confirmed. Just below the disclosure threshold, but enough to raise serious concerns about fiduciary duty. The chess pieces were aligning. While they attacked me for innovation, they were strip mining the company my grandmother built. It was time to reveal our position. The revelation came during a settlement conference that my parents' lawyers had demanded. They strutted into our conference room expecting capitulation. Instead, they found me flanked not just by Celestial's legal team, but by representatives from 3 major investment firms. Before we discussed settlement, I began, there's something you should know. These gentlemen represent institutional investors who, combined with shares held in trust by Sarah Blackwood's estate, control 38% of Wellington Holdings. The color drained from the lead attorney's face. That's impossible. We would have seen the filings. Not if purchases were made carefully under the disclosure threshold through properly structured entities, Margaret explained. All completely legal, all documented, all very concerned about the current management's performance. I slid a folder across the table. This is a shareholder derivative suit we're filing tomorrow unless we reach a different resolution today. Breach of fiduciary duty, corporate waste, self-dealing. The evidence is comprehensive. My father's attorney grabbed the folder, scanning quickly. With each page, his expression grew more strained. This is extortion. This is consequences. I corrected. Your clients attacked their own shareholder, wasted corporate assets on a vendetta, and continues to mismanage a company into the ground. The board has a duty to act. What do you want? He dropped the aggressive tone, recognizing the shifted power dynamic. Complete withdrawal of your lawsuit with prejudice, public apology for the false allegations, and... I paused, meeting his eyes. A special shareholders meeting to discuss board composition and management changes. The room erupted in objections, threats, and legal posturing, but the math was inexorable. With 38% of shares and growing concerns about management, we had the leverage to force changes. The settlement negotiations stretched through the night. My parents, summoned by their panicking lawyers, arrived at 3 a.m. Seeing them in the harsh conference room lighting, I was struck by how they'd aged. My father's commanding presence had withered into defensive bluster. My mother's perfect facade showed cracks that makeup couldn't hide. You orchestrated this, my father accused, pointing a trembling finger. Manipulated that woman into buying our company out from under us. Sarah Blackwood needed no manipulation. She saw an undervalued asset being mismanaged and invested accordingly. I kept my voice level, despite years of hurt demanding expression. Just business as you always taught me. You're destroying your heritage, my mother said. The Wellington legacy was built by grandmother Elizabeth, not you, a fact the original incorporation documents clearly show. I placed copies before them. The legacy you're destroying with your greed and pride. The legal teams eventually hammered out terms. The lawsuit would be withdrawn. A carefully worded statement would be released about resolving differences. The special shareholders meeting would be held in 60 days. But I wasn't satisfied with legal victory. As dawn broke over Manhattan, I made my final move. There's one more thing, I said as everyone prepared to leave. I'll be transparent with shareholders about my identity and history with the Grand Wellington. No more hiding behind shell companies. My father's lawyer grabbed his arm before he could lunge across the table. You vindictive... Transparent, I repeated. Shareholders deserve to know that Antonia Wellington, discarded for working as a maid, now owns more of the company than any individual except you. They deserve to know what that says about your judgment. The meeting ended with papers signed and pride shattered. My parents left without another word, their empire's foundation cracking beneath them. The lawyers departed to craft careful statements that would minimize everyone's embarrassment. I stood alone in the conference room as sunrise painted the city gold, feeling the weight of what we'd accomplished. Sarah's long game had reached its crescendo. The girl banished for betraying family dignity now held keys to the kingdom that had exiled her. But this wasn't the ending. It was merely the close of one chapter. The shareholder meeting loomed, and with it decisions about the Grand Wellington's future. The board would have to listen now, had to consider changes that could save the company my grandmother built. Margaret Chen found me there an hour later, still processing the night's events. You could take over, she said quietly. With that share percentage and performance evidence, you could probably gain control. I know. I turned from the window to face her. But would that honor Sarah's vision or my grandmother's taking something versus building something better? What will you do? I thought of Sarah's words, build something magnificent. Not tear down, but transform. Not revenge, but redemption. I'm going to save the Grand Wellington, I decided. Not for them, but for the employees, the legacy, the guests who deserve better. And then I'm going to show the industry what happens when you combine tradition with innovation, when you honor the past while building the future. That's a tall order. Good thing I learned from the best. The war was won, but battles remained. In 60 days, shareholders would decide the Grand Wellington's fate. Between now and then, I had a hotel empire to run, innovations to implement, and a legacy to protect. Sarah would have been proud. More importantly, she would have been planning the next move. As her heir in vision, if not blood, I owed nothing less than the same strategic brilliance she'd gifted me. The corporate warfare had ended not with destruction, but with opportunity. Now came the harder task, building something worthy of the women who'd made it possible. The shareholder meeting was 59 days away when I made my boldest move yet. Instead of waiting for the corporate drama to unfold, I decided to accelerate the endgame. If the Grand Wellington was bleeding, perhaps it was time to offer a transfusion on my terms. "You want to buy the Grand Wellington?" James Slow, our CFO, stared at me across the conference room table as if I'd suggested acquiring the moon. "Antonia, with respect, that's a massive undertaking. We're talking about $1 billion property minimum." 900 million, I corrected, sliding the valuation report across to him. "Their stock has dropped 30% since the lawsuit fiasco became public. Factor in deferred maintenance, declining occupancy, and brand damage from the recent scandals. Real value is closer to 800 million. Margaret Chen leaned forward. "Even so, that's a significant portion of Celestial's capital. The board would need compelling reasons to approve such an acquisition." "Then let's give them some." I activated the presentation I'd spent 3 sleepless nights preparing. The Grand Wellington sits on Manhattan real estate worth 400 million alone. The building, despite cosmetic neglect, has incredible bones. The brand, tarnished but not broken, still carries prestige internationally. "But the operational challenges," Rebecca Martinez interjected. "Their staff morale is in the basement, systems are outdated, and they're hemorrhaging corporate accounts." "All fixable problems," I countered. "We've proven that with Miami. What's not easily replaceable is location history and architectural significance. The Grand Wellington is a New York landmark. In the right hands, it could anchor Celestial's luxury portfolio for the next century." The room fell silent as they absorbed the proposal. David finally spoke what everyone was thinking. "Your personal connection complicates this. The optics are complicated? Yes." I stood moving to the window overlooking the city. "But think about the story. Discarded daughter returns to save family legacy through the company that gave her a chance. Media will eat it up. More importantly, employees at both companies will see it as a vindication of our values versus theirs." Over the following days, I built consensus one conversation at a time. Board members who'd been skeptical of my youth suddenly saw the acquisition as bold rather than reckless. The financial team ran models showing potential returns that made their calculators smoke. Most crucially, 3 of our major institutional investors quietly indicated they'd support the move. But I needed more than corporate support. I needed inside intelligence about the Grand Wellington's true condition. That's where Maria and the shadow network of employees came in. We met at a diner in Queens, far from Manhattan's watchful eyes. Maria brought 2 colleagues, the head of maintenance and the reservations manager. Over coffee and pie, they painted a picture of an institution in crisis. "Mr. Wellington hasn't been seen in weeks," the maintenance head, Carl, reported. "Rumors say his health is failing from the stress. Your mother runs things now, but she only cares about the event spaces and restaurant." "Occupancy?" I asked. The reservations manager, Janet, laughed bitterly. 48% last week. "We're upgrading every guest just to fill premium rooms. Corporate accounts are canceling contracts. 2 major law firms moved their visiting attorney accommodations to the plaza." "What about staff?" "Losing 2 or 3 people a week," Maria said. "Good people who see no future. The ones staying are either too scared to leave or too close to retirement to start over." I took notes, seeing opportunity in every problem they described. If someone came in with resources and a plan to restore the hotel's greatness, would staff support changes? The 3 exchanged glances. Carl spoke for them. "Ms. Rodriguez, most of us remember when you worked alongside us. We saw how they threw you away. If you're asking if we'd welcome you back as someone who could save our jobs and dignity, the answer is yes." Armed with intelligence and supported by carefully built consensus, I approached the September board meeting with quiet confidence. The presentation was scheduled for item 7 on the agenda, innocuously titled Strategic Acquisition Opportunities. When my turn came, I didn't start with spreadsheets or projections. Instead, I showed a photo of the Grand Wellington from 1928, the year it opened. This hotel revolutionized luxury hospitality in New York. I began. My grandmother, Elizabeth, designed innovations that became industry standards. The first hotel spa in Manhattan, the first rooftop restaurant, the first to offer childcare services for traveling families. I clicked through historical photos showing the property's golden age. But innovation without evolution becomes stagnation. While competitors adapted, the Grand Wellington clung to yesterday's glory. Today, it's a sleeping giant in the heart of Manhattan, waiting for someone to wake it up. The financial analysis came next, brutal in its honesty. Current performance was dismal, but potential returns made board members lean forward. I showed Miami's transformation as proof of concept, then multiplied by Manhattan's premium market position. The asking price? Harrison Cross interrupted, still skeptical, despite our previous battles. They haven't listed it, I admitted, but our analysis suggests they'll have to. Debt service is consuming cash flow. Without significant capital injection or operational changes, they'll face default within 18 months. So we wait, another member suggested. Let them grow desperate. Or we make a preemptive offer that lets them save face while saving the institution. I met each board member's eyes. $850 million structured as 70% cash, 30% celestial stock. They get liquidity and upside participation. We get an iconic property at below market rates. Your personal connection, Cross began, is exactly why this works, I interrupted. I know that property intimately, every strength to leverage, every weakness to fix. More importantly, the story of redemption and restoration will generate millions in free publicity. The debate stretched for 2 hours. Financial models were dissected, risks analyzed, alternatives proposed. But eventually, ambition won over caution. The board approved moving forward with a formal offer contingent on due diligence and acceptable terms. I had my hunting license. Now I needed to bag the elephant. The approach required delicacy. A direct offer would trigger Robert Wellington's pride and Patricia's rage. Instead, I worked through intermediaries, investment bankers, who whispered to the Grand Wellington's board about a motivated buyer willing to pay premium prices for the right opportunity. While those seeds germinated, I structured the acquisition vehicle. Rather than celestial buying directly, we created Wellington Heritage Holdings, a subsidiary that honored the name while changing the game. The structure accomplished 2 goals. It provided negotiating flexibility and sent a subtle message about preserving rather than destroying legacy. 3 weeks after board approval, I got the call I'd been expecting. Harrison Cross, despite our past conflicts, had been elected to the Grand Wellington's board as an independent director, part of the changes forced by our shareholder activism. They're willing to talk, he said without preamble. Off the record, no commitments, but Robert's health issues and the October debt payment have them considering options. When Thursday, private dining room at the Yale Club. Principals only, no lawyers. Can you handle seeing your parents in that setting? I thought of all the dinners where I'd been dismissed, all the conversations where my ideas were ignored. I've handled worse. Tell them I'll be there. Thursday arrived wrapped in autumn rain that turned Manhattan into an impressionist painting. The Yale Club stood like a bastion of old money privilege, all dark wood and whispered traditions. I arrived precisely on time, wearing a black suit that meant business and pearls that whispered heritage. The maitre d' led me to a private room where my parents waited. The months since our legal battle had not been kind to them. Robert Wellington, once commanding enough to fill any space, seemed diminished. His suit hung loose on narrowed shoulders. Patricia sat rigidly beside him, her makeup unable to hide the strained carving lines around her eyes. Antonia, my father's voice held none of its old authority. You look well. Robert, Patricia. I took the seat across from them, maintaining professional distance. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Harrison said you had a proposal, my mother said, cutting through pleasantries, though why we should listen to someone who's tried to destroy us. I've tried to save you from yourselves, I corrected calmly. The lawsuits, the public battles, the corporate waste, those were your choices. I'm here to offer a better one. I placed a single folder on the table. Wellington. Heritage Holdings is prepared to acquire the Grand Wellington for $850 million. 70% cash at closing, 30% in Celestial stock. You'd maintain a significant interest in the property's future success while solving current liquidity issues. My father's hands trembled slightly as he opened the folder. I watched him process the numbers, seeing the moment he realized this was salvation, disguised as surrender. This is below market value, he said, falling back on negotiation reflexes. It's above current value, I countered. We both know the true financial position. This offer won't last indefinitely. When news of your debt situation becomes public, and other buyers will offer half this amount. You want us to hand over our life's work to you, Patricia's voice cracked with emotion. After everything. I want to save Grandmother Elizabeth's vision from bankruptcy. Whether you participate in that salvation is your choice. I softened my tone slightly. Look at the terms. You'd be significant celestial shareholders. If we succeed in restoring the property, you benefit. Your names stay on the building. Your legacy, properly managed, continues. They exchanged glances, 60 years of marriage compressed into a silent conversation. Finally, Robert spoke. We need time to consider, and any deal would require board approval. Of course. You have 2 weeks before we need to explore other opportunities. I stood, gathering my composure. Whatever you decide, I hope you understand, this isn't about revenge. It's about honoring what Grandmother built and ensuring it survives for future generations. I left them there, 2 people confronting the price of pride. The walk back to my office felt like crossing decades rather than blocks. Each step took me further from the girl they discarded and closer to the woman who could save what they'd nearly destroyed. David waited in my office with champagne on ice and anxiety on his face. How did it go? They'll take the deal, I said with certainty that surprised even me. They have no choice. The only question is whether they'll do it gracefully or grudgingly. And if they choose grudgingly, I thought of Sarah's lessons of building rather than destroying, of winning with wisdom rather than force. Then we'll restore the Grand Wellington so magnificently that their grudges will look like what they are, the bitter echoes of people who confused inheritance with achievement. 10 days later, Harrison Cross called. The Grand Wellington's board had voted to accept our offer contingent on due diligence and final negotiations. My parents had abstained rather than voting against it, a small grace in their capitulation. Congratulations, Cross said, and I heard genuine respect in his voice. You've won. No, I corrected, looking at the photo of my grandmother on my desk. We've just been given the chance to build something worthy of the women who came before us. The real work starts now. The acquisition would close in 60 days. Between now and then, I had to prepare Celestial for its biggest integration ever planned, the Grand Wellington's transformation, and somehow find a way to honor the past while building the future. Sarah would have loved this moment, not for the victory, but for the opportunity. As rain cleared and sunset painted Manhattan in shades of amber and gold, I raised a silent toast to the mentor who'd made it all possible. The acquisition wasn't an ending, it was a beginning, and I intended to make it magnificent. The due diligence team descended on the Grand Wellington like archaeologists excavating a lost civilization. For 3 weeks, they combed through every financial record, every maintenance log, every employee file. I stayed away from the operational review, knowing my presence would complicate an already delicate situation. But the reports that flowed back painted a picture of an institution surviving on reputation alone. The bones are good. Our head of operations, Michael Torres, reported during a Friday evening debrief. But the systemic neglect is worse than we anticipated. They've been using creative accounting to hide deferred maintenance that could top 50 million. Employee situation. I asked, though Maria's network had already given me unofficial insights. Morale is subterranean. Turnover approaching 40% annually. The remaining staff is exceptional, but they're holding on by fingernails. He paused. There's significant curiosity about you, though. Word has spread about who's behind the acquisition. I'd anticipated this moment since proposing the deal. My identity as Antonia Wellington couldn't remain hidden once we took control. The question was how to reveal it in a way that built rather than burned bridges. Set up an all-hands meeting for the day. After closing, I decided, every single employee from executives to overnight cleaning staff. Mandatory attendance, paid time for those off shift. That's over 400 people, Michael warned. Then we'd better find a venue that holds 400. While the logistics team scrambled, I focused on crafting the message that could either unite or divide the workforce I'd soon inherit. Sarah's words echoed constantly, build something magnificent, not through demolition, but through transformation. The closing itself was anticlimactic. Papers signed in a sterile conference room, wire transfers confirmed handshakes that felt like touching history. My parents didn't attend, sending their lawyers instead, but Harrison Cross was there representing the selling board, and he pulled me aside afterward. Your father wanted me to give you this, he said, handing me a sealed envelope with my name in Robert Wellington's shaky handwriting. I tucked it away, unread, focused on the immediate challenges ahead. There would be time for personal reckonings after the professional ones were handled. The all-hands meeting was scheduled for the Grand Wellington's ballroom at 10 the next morning. I arrived at 6 wanting to walk the property as its owner rather than its exile. The marble halls echoed with memory hiding behind potted palms during galas, racing Marcus through corridors while our parents entertained dreaming of the day I'd help run this empire. Now I owned it, and the weight felt heavier than anticipated. The ballroom filled slowly, employees entering with the wariness of people who'd seen too many promises broken. Department heads clustered near the front, while hourly workers hung back, unsure of their place in whatever new order was coming. I recognized many faces from my research and Maria's intelligence. Carl from maintenance, Janet from reservations, dozens of others who'd kept the hotel running despite management's neglect. At precisely 10, I took the stage. No podium, no barrier between me and the people whose lives I now affected. The murmuring died as I stood there, letting them see me clearly. Good morning. I began, my voice carrying without a microphone. My name is Antonia Rodriguez. As of yesterday, Celestial Hotels owns this property, and I'll be personally overseeing its transformation. But before we discuss the future, I need to share something about the past. I paused, meeting eyes throughout the room. 25 years ago, a 5-year-old girl stood in this ballroom watching her parents host a charity gala. She dreamed of someday helping run this magnificent hotel. 15 years later, that same girl was banished from this building for having the audacity to learn the hospitality business from the ground up by working as a maid at a competitor. The revelation rippled through the crowd like electricity. I saw recognition dawn on older employees' faces, connecting the woman before them with the Wellington daughter who disappeared into scandal and rumor. That girl was me, I continued. I am Antonia Wellington, granddaughter of Elizabeth Wellington, who founded this hotel, daughter of Robert and Patricia Wellington, who cast me out for refusing to be the ornament they wanted. And now, through paths neither straight nor easy, I returned not for revenge, but for redemption. The silence was absolute. 400 people barely breathed as I laid out truth they'd never expected to hear. Some of you remember me. Others know only the stories, most of them likely fabricated to justify my exile. So let me be clear about who I really am. I stepped forward, voice strengthening. I'm someone who started at the bottom because I wanted to understand this business from every angle. Who cleaned toilets and made beds because I believed real leadership meant knowing every job in the building. Who was disowned for choosing education over entitlement. I'm also someone who transformed Celestial's failing Miami property into a jewel, who turned crisis into opportunity in Boston, who helped build Celestial into the innovative powerhouse that could afford to buy this hotel. I let pride color my voice, and I'm someone who never forgot the Grand Wellington or the people who make it run. Movement in the middle rows caught my eye. Carl from maintenance was standing, his weathered face unreadable. For a moment I thought he might walk out. Instead, he began to clap. Slowly, deliberately, the sound echoing in the ballroom. Janet joined him. Then Maria. Then a wave of applause that built until the entire room was on their feet. Not the polite corporate applause I'd expected, but something raw and real. I saw tears on several faces, including my own reflection in the mirrored walls. When the sound finally died, I had to clear my throat before continuing. Thank you, but I didn't come back for applause. I came back to build something worthy of this building's history and your dedication, which means changes. Big ones. I outlined the transformation plan, $50 million in immediate renovations, technology upgrades to rival any modern property, but most importantly, investment in people. Training programs, restored benefits, profit sharing that would make every employee a stakeholder in our success. The Grand Wellington will become Celestial's flagship property, I announced, the crown jewel of our luxury portfolio. But only if we work together. I can bring resources and vision, but you bring the expertise and heart that makes hospitality real. I need every one of you. Questions followed practical concerns about job security, timelines, and expectations. I answered honestly, admitting what I didn't know, promising to find out. The skepticism gradually gave way to cautious optimism. As the meeting concluded, employees filed past, many pausing to shake my hand or share memories. One elderly bellman grabbed my hands with both of his. I remember you as a little girl, he said, eyes bright with emotion. You always said thank you even then. Your parents never did. Welcome home, Ms. Wellington. Rodriguez, I corrected gently. I'm Antonia Rodriguez now. No, he said firmly. You're the Wellington this place deserves. After the last employee left, I stood alone in the ballroom where my journey had both started and restarted. The envelope from my father weighed heavy in my pocket. Finally, I opened it, finding his careful handwriting on Grand Wellington stationery. Antonia, I don't expect forgiveness. Pride has been my sin and downfall, as you've proven with devastating effectiveness. But perhaps understanding is possible. I was raised to believe preservation of legacy justified any action. Your mother and I convinced ourselves that molding you and Marcus into predetermined roles was love. We were wrong. You've built something we never could success earn rather than inherited. The hotel is yours now. Make it what we couldn't, what your grandmother would have. Despite everything, I remain your father. I folded the letter carefully, unsure whether it changed anything, but grateful for its existence. Reconciliation might be impossible, but acknowledgement was a start. The real work began immediately. Department heads who'd grown comfortable with minimal oversight found themselves in daily improvement meetings. Sacred cows of inefficiency were slaughtered without ceremony. But for every cut, we invested twice as much in what mattered: people, quality, and innovation. The press caught wind of the story within days. prodigal daughter returns, hotel heiress buys back her birthright, screamed from business sections nationwide. I gave one exclusive interview to the Times, controlling the narrative while refusing to sensationalize family drama. This isn't about the past, I told their reporter. It's about showing that tradition and innovation can coexist, that honoring history doesn't mean being trapped by it. The renovation began with symbolic changes. My grandmother's portrait, long relegated to storage, was restored to prominence in the lobby. The employee break room, a dingy basement afterthought, was transformed into a comfortable space that showed staff they mattered. Technology upgrades started with back-office systems that made jobs easier rather than guest-facing gimmicks. But the most important changes were human. I promoted from within wherever possible, elevating employees who'd shown loyalty during the hotel's darkest days. Carl became head of facilities, his practical wisdom worth more than any consultant's theories. Janet took over revenue management, her years of watching rooms go empty finally channeled into strategic pricing. Maria, my invaluable ally, I made head of housekeeping with a mandate to implement the same standards of excellence and dignity I'd learned from Rosa in my own maid days. The look on her face when I offered the position was worth every battle I'd fought to reach this moment. 3 months into the transformation, I hosted the first Wellington Heritage Foundation Gala in the restored ballroom. The event honored women in hospitality, with proceeds funding scholarships for employees' children. My parents weren't invited, but Harrison Cross attended, pulling me aside during cocktails. "You've exceeded even Sarah's expectations," he said. "The board is impressed. Hell, I'm impressed, and I fought against you." "Sarah taught me that the best revenge is success that lifts others," I replied. "This is just the beginning." Speaking of beginnings," he gestured toward the entrance where a familiar figure stood uncertainly. "Marcus." My brother looked older, worn by his prison stint and the family's fall, but his eyes held something I'd never seen before: humility. I excused myself from Cross and approached Marcus, meeting him in the lobby where we'd played as children. "I wasn't sure you'd see me," he said. "I wasn't sure you'd come." We stood awkwardly, decades of rivalry and recent betrayal creating walls between us. "How are you?" "Better. Therapy helps. Losing everything helps more." His laugh held bitter self-awareness. I wanted to apologize, not for legal reasons or family pressure, because I finally understand what you tried to tell me years ago: earned success is the only kind worth having. And now I'm working at a boutique hotel in Brooklyn, night manager. I'm good at it, he added with shy pride. Turns out when you stop expecting special treatment, you can actually learn things. We talked for an hour, carefully rebuilding bridges I'd thought permanently burned. When he left, promising to keep in touch, I felt another piece of the past heal into something bearable. The Grand Wellington's renaissance continued. Occupancy climbed to 70% within 6 months, then 80%. Travel and leisure featured us as New York's classic reborn. Corporate accounts returned, drawn by innovation wrapped in familiar luxury. But the sweetest validation came from an unexpected source. One evening, as I reviewed reports in what had been my father's office, security called up. "Ms. Rodriguez, there's a Patricia Wellington here. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's quite insistent." My mother, here after months of silence. "Send her up," I decided, "with escort." She entered slowly, age showing despite her perfect posture. Designer clothes couldn't hide the weariness in her movements. She looked around the transformed office, taking in the changes I'd made: modern furniture, my grandmother's photographs, awards from my celestial achievements. "It looks different," she said finally. "Everything looks different from a new perspective." I gestured to a chair. "What brings you here, Patricia?" She flinched at the use of her first name but sat carefully. "I wanted to see what you've done. The reviews, the articles, everyone talks about the transformation. And it's remarkable." The admission seemed to pain her. You've made it better than we ever did. Your grandmother would be proud. She'd be proud I saved it. She'd be disappointed it needed saving from her own son and daughter-in-laws. Patricia's composure finally cracked. We destroyed everything, didn't we? The legacy, the family, Marcus's future, She stopped, unable to name what they'd done to me. You made choices. So did I. Mine led here. I kept my voice neutral, offering neither forgiveness nor condemnation. What do you want, Patricia? I don't know. To understand maybe how the daughter we raised to be decoration became this. You didn't raise me. You tried to constrain me. When that failed, you discarded me. I stood signaling the meeting's end. But your failure was my liberation. I became this not because of you, but despite you. She left without another word, shoulders bowed under the weight of recognition. I watched her go, feeling not satisfaction, but a kind of weary peace. The reveal was complete. All cards on the table, all truths spoken. The Grand Wellington thrived under its new identity, classic luxury enhanced by innovation tradition, honored through transformation. My grandmother's dream filtered through Sarah's wisdom, and my own hard-won experience finally achieved. But even as I celebrated the victory, I knew it was just another beginning. The industry was watching competitors scrambling to match our innovations, new challenges arising daily. I was ready for all of it. The girl they'd banished had returned as the woman they'd never imagined. And this was only the first act of what I intended to build. The Federal Bureau of Investigation arrived on a Tuesday that had started with such ordinary concerns, reviewing breakfast service feedback, approving uniform redesigns, debating whether to add oat milk to our coffee stations. Then 3 agents in dark suits walked through the Grand Wellington's restored lobby with the purposeful stride of people who owned whatever room they entered. Ms. Rodriguez, the lead agent, a woman with steel gray hair and matching eyes, displayed her credentials. Special Agent Chen, we need to discuss some financial irregularities we've discovered during our investigation of Wellington Holdings. My assistant David moved to intervene, but I waved him back. Of course, my office, or would you prefer somewhere more private? Your office is fine. This concerns you only peripherally. You're not under investigation, she clarified, which somehow made the situation more ominous rather than less. In my office, Agent Chen and her colleagues laid out documents with the precision of car dealers revealing a royal flush. Bank records, emails, transfer authorizations, a paper trail that wound through offshore accounts like a snake through international gardens. During your due diligence for the acquisition, your team flagged several questionable transactions, Agent Chen began. What started as routine verification has uncovered systematic fraud dating back over a decade. Your parents, Ms. Rodriguez, have been stealing from their own investors. The words landed like physical blows, but I kept my expression neutral. What kind of fraud? Embezzlement, primarily. Funds marked for renovation diverted to personal accounts. Phantom vendor payments to shell companies they controlled. Conservative estimate puts it at $30 million over 15 years. $30 million. While they'd preached about family legacy and tradition, my parents had been looting the very institution they claimed to protect. The hypocrisy was staggering even by their standards. We need access to all acquisition documents, Agent Chen continued. Any communications with Robert or Patricia Wellington during negotiations. We're building a federal case and your cooperation would be appreciated. Of course, I managed, though my mind raced through implications. I'll have our legal team compile everything immediately, but I need to know, what does this mean for the hotel, for our employees? The asset purchase is clean. You bought the property, not the criminal liability. But, she paused significantly, the investigation will be public, very public. Your parents will likely face significant jail time. After the agents left with boxes of documents, I sat alone in the office that had once been my father's throne room. The weight of revelation pressed down like atmospheric pressure before a storm. My parents hadn't just failed as parents, they'd failed as basic fiduciaries, stealing from the very people who'd trusted them with investments. Margaret Chen arrived within an hour, our general counsel looking grim. I've reviewed what they shared. It's airtight. Your parents are finished. Options. For them, plea bargain if they're lucky, trial if they're not. For us, distance ourselves, completely cooperate fully, and make it crystal clear that Celestial discovered and reported these crimes during legitimate due diligence. Draft a statement. I decided. Factual, no editorializing. We uncovered irregularities, reported them to authorities, and will cooperate completely. Focus on our commitment to ethical operations and protecting the Grand Wellington's employees and guests. The news broke that evening. Wellington, hotel dynasty accused of massive fraud, dominated every business headline. The photographs were brutal FBI agents carrying boxes from my parents' penthouse, their lawyer making terse, no-comment statements, years of perceived respectability crumbling in real time. My phone exploded with calls I didn't answer. Board members seeking reassurance, reporters smelling blood, industry colleagues torn between sympathy and schadenfreude. But the call that mattered came near midnight. Marcus. I just saw, he said without preamble. Are you okay? I don't know, I admitted, allowing vulnerability with the only person who might understand. They stole 30 million, Marcus. While lecturing us about family honor, they were common thieves with better suits. I know, God, I know. Remember when they cut the employee Christmas bonuses, claiming tight budgets? That was the same year Dad bought the yacht. His bitter laugh echoed my own feelings. We were raised by criminals who dressed their crimes in designer labels. What do we do now? What you've already done. Build something better. Show the world that Wellington can mean something other than greed and betrayal. He paused. I'm proud of you, Tony, for seeing what I was too blind to see, for getting out when I was too weak to leave. After we hung up, I walked through the hotel, needing to see what I'd saved from my parents' destruction. Night shift workers nodded respectfully. Guests moved through spaces restored to glory. The building itself seemed to breathe with renewed life. This was worth protecting, worth the pain of watching my parents' final fall. The next days blurred into crisis management. I held emergency meetings with department heads, assuring them their jobs were safe. Personally called major clients to reinforce that new management meant new ethics. Most importantly, I gathered all employees for another ballroom meeting. Or you've seen the news. I began facing 400 people whose lives had been affected by my family's crimes. The previous owners, who happened to be my biological parents, stand accused of stealing millions while you worked without raises, without proper benefits, without the support you deserved. Anger rippled through the crowd, years of resentment finding validation. I can't undo their theft or their neglect, but I can promise this: every dollar they stole from this institution's future will invest back twice over. Every corner they cut will rebuild properly. Every employee they undervalued will support completely. Pretty words, someone called from the back. How do we know you're different? I recognized the voice, Tony from engineering, who'd worked here 40 years watching promises broken. Fair question. So here's an unfair answer. Profit sharing starts immediately, not in some distant future, but from this quarter. Every employee gets a percentage of profits above our baseline. You succeed when the hotel succeeds. The mood shifted palpably. I outlined the complete compensation, restructuring, restored benefits, training programs, clear advancement paths. Not charity, but investment in the people who made success possible. Your parents never did anything like this, Janet from reservations said, wonder in her voice. My parents never understood that employees aren't costs to minimize, but assets to cultivate. Their greed blinded them to basic business sense. I met eyes throughout the room. We're going to prove that ethical operation isn't just morally right, but financially superior. The transformation accelerated. With employees motivated by actual stakes and outcomes, service levels soared. The fraud investigation, rather than tainting us, became proof of new management's integrity. The Grand Wellington Reborn with Honor became our unofficial motto, appearing on employee t-shirts I pretended not to authorize. 3 weeks after the FBI visit, the other shoe dropped. My parents were arrested at their penthouse in a scene that played across every news outlet. The footage was harsh. My mother in handcuffs, my father looking every year of his age as agents led them away. Despite everything, seeing their humiliation brought no joy, only a hollow ache for the family we might have been. Harrison Cross called that evening. The board wanted me to convey their complete support. Your handling of this situation has been exemplary. Just trying to protect what matters, I said, exhausted by the emotional toll. Which is why I'm calling with another matter. The American Hotel Association wants to honor you with their Innovation in Leadership Award, specifically for turning crisis into transformation at multiple properties. 6 months ago, such recognition would have thrilled me. Now it felt like noise compared to the real work of rebuilding. I'll accept on behalf of our teams. They deserve recognition. The legal process ground forward. My parents' lawyers reached out about a plea deal needing character references to argue for leniency. I declined, knowing my testimony would damn rather than defend them. Marcus made the same choice, united in refusing to enable any more family destruction. James Hartley resurfaced, sending a letter requesting a meeting. Curiosity won over revulsion, and I agreed to see him at a neutral location. He looked diminished, the golden boy tarnished beyond recognition. I wanted to apologize, he began, and to warn you, your mother approached me last week. She's trying to gather dirt about your time at Celestial, anything to mitigate her sentence by damaging your reputation. Let her try, I said calmly. My record speaks for itself. She's desperate, Antonia. Prison terrifies her more than poverty. She'll say anything, claim you knew about the fraud, that you engineered their downfall for revenge. Did I know they were stealing? No. Did I engineer their downfall? I considered the question honestly. I revealed their incompetence and fought their vindictiveness. If that led investigators to discover their crimes, perhaps they should have been better criminals. James flinched at my coldness. You've changed. I've evolved. From the naive girl who thought your love was real to someone who understands that people reveal themselves through actions, not words. I stood to leave. Thank you for the warning. Consider us even. The trial began in spring, just as the Grand Wellington celebrated its first profitable quarter under Celestial management. I attended one day, needing to see the conclusion of our twisted family saga. My parents sat at the defendant's table, diminished figures in conservative clothes meant to inspire sympathy. When they saw me in the gallery, my mother's face cycled through emotions, surprise, hope, then resignation, as I remained stone-faced. My father simply nodded, acknowledging my presence without expecting support. The prosecutor laid out their crimes methodically. $32 million stolen over 16 years. Renovation funds diverted while employees worked in deteriorating conditions. Investor reports falsified while executive bonuses climbed. The evidence was overwhelming, their guilt undeniable. During a recess, Patricia Wellington approached me in the hallway. Court officers watched nervously, but I waved them off. Satisfied? She asked, venom failing to mask desperation. No, I answered honestly. Watching your destruction brings no satisfaction, just relief that you can't hurt anyone else. We're your parents. You were my parents. Then you chose greed over family, pride over love, status over substance. Every choice you made led here. Own it with whatever dignity remains. The jury deliberated for less than a day. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing would come later, but the forfeitures began immediately. Their assets built on stolen funds would be liquidated for victim restitution. The penthouse, the cars, the art collection, all gone. I returned to the Grand Wellington that evening to find it bustling with life. A medical conference filled our meeting rooms. Tourists admired the restored lobby. Employees moved with purpose and pride. This was the true Wellington legacy, not what my parents had corrupted, but what my grandmother had envisioned, what Sarah had helped me build. Marcus joined me for dinner in the restaurant where we'd once been forbidden to eat unless accompanying our parents. Now it was packed with diners enjoying our new chef's innovations. "How do you feel?" he asked over wine that cost less than our old family bottles but tasted of honest success. Free, I realized. For the first time, din, truly free. No more wondering if reconciliation was possible. No more guilt about their failures. They made their choices. We've made ours. To choices he toasted, and to the future we build from their ruins. The next morning brought challenges unrelated to family drama. A competitor was poaching our staff, a supplier had quality issues, a guest complaint needed personal attention. Normal problems requiring normal solutions, no fraud or betrayal involved. I handled each with increasing confidence, surrounded by teams that trusted my leadership because I'd earned it. The Grand Wellington thrived not despite the scandal, but because we transformed shame into determination, crime into commitment to ethics. 6 months later at the industry awards, Harrison Cross had mentioned I stood at a podium looking out at hospitality's elite. The speech I'd prepared sat ignored as I spoke from the heart about transformation through transparency, success through service, the radical idea that treating employees as partners rather than expenses created sustainable excellence. The applause was gratifying, but the text from Marcus meant more. Watching online, Grandmother Elizabeth would be crying happy tears. So am I. Later that night, alone in my office with the city lights painting shadows on the walls, I opened a package that had arrived that morning. Inside was my grandmother's jewelry box, recovered from my parents' forfeited assets. Among the pearls and diamonds was a simple card in her handwriting. "For my granddaughter May, you build bridges where others built walls." I clasped her favorite necklace around my neck, feeling the weight of legacy properly understood. Not inheritance, but inspiration, not entitlement, but opportunity to create something worthy of those who came before, while blazing paths for those who'd come after. The power had shifted from those who hoarded to those who built, from those who took to those who gave, from a dynasty of greed to a legacy of grace. And this was just the beginning. Marcus arrived at my office on a rain-soaked Thursday, carrying 2 coffees and looking like he'd aged 5 years in the 6 months since our parents' conviction. His boutique hotel job had given him structure, but the weight of our family's public disgrace showed in the lines around his eyes and the careful way he held himself, as if bracing for more bad news. "Sentencing is next week," he said, without preamble, setting a coffee on my desk. "Their lawyers want us there. Show of family support might influence the judge toward leniency." I accepted the coffee, but not the premise. They made their choices without considering family. Why should family considerations save them now? Because despite everything, they're still our parents. He sank into the chair across from me, exhaustion evident. "I've been seeing a therapist, Dr. Patel. She's helped me understand how they shaped us, pitted us against each other from childhood." "Tell me something I don't know." "Did you know Mother used to tell me you were plotting to steal my inheritance, that every achievement of yours was designed to diminish me?" His laugh held bitter recognition. "While telling you I was the golden child who could do no wrong. Classic triangulation keeping us so focused on competing, we never noticed them robbing everyone blind." The revelation shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. All those years of resentment carefully cultivated by parents who needed us divided to maintain control. "She told me you laughed at my business ideas. Said you called me delusional for thinking I could work in hotels." "I never said that. Never even thought it." Marcus set down his coffee with shaking hands. God, Antonia, I was jealous of your drive. You had actual dreams while I had expectations, but I never mocked them. That was all her playing us like chess pieces. We sat in silence, processing decades of manipulation. Outside rain turned Manhattan into an impressionist painting, all blurred edges and reflected light. Inside, two siblings finally saw clearly. Dr. Patel says the real prison isn't what they're facing, but what they built around us, Marcus continued. Walls of expectation, chains of conditional love. We were accessories to their empire, not children to be nurtured. Yet you want to support them at sentencing. I want to face them. Say what needs saying before they disappear into federal custody. He met my eyes' vulnerability, replacing his old arrogance. Will you come not for them, but so we can do this together? The request hung between us like a bridge waiting to be crossed. I thought of all the times we'd been positioned as enemies, all the opportunities for sibling support our parents had sabotaged. Perhaps this was a chance to reclaim what had been stolen from us. I'll come, I decided, but I won't speak for leniency. If the judge asks, I'll tell the truth. That's all I want, truth. Finally, some goddamn truth in this family. The sentencing arrived with media circus intensity. Reporters lined the courthouse steps, shouting questions about family loyalty and corporate justice. Marcus and I walked through the gauntlet together, presenting a united front that had nothing to do with our parents and everything to do with us. Inside the courtroom, Robert and Patricia Wellington looked like strangers wearing our parents' faces. Prison uniforms had replaced designer suits. Reality had replaced arrogance. When they saw us in the gallery, my mother's face crumpled while my father simply closed his eyes, accepting our presence as witness rather than support. The judge, Honorable Catherine Hayes, reviewed the case with clinical precision. 32 million stolen, 400 employees denied rightful compensation, dozens of investors defrauded. The numbers painted a picture of systematic greed that no family photo could soften. Before I pronounce sentence, I'll hear from any family members who wish to speak. Marcus stood first, hands trembling. Your Honor, I'm not here to ask for leniency. I'm here to acknowledge patterns. My parents stole more than money. They stole trust potential, the chance for genuine family connection. They taught their children that love was transactional, success was worth any price, and people were tools for advancement. His voice strengthened as he continued. I followed their model straight into my own criminal conviction. Only losing everything taught me what they never could. Integrity matters more than inheritance. My sister figured that out despite them. I'm still learning because of them. He sat down heavily. Judge Hayes turned to me. Ms. Rodriguez. I stood, feeling the weight of moment. Your Honor, I've spent years building what my parents tried to destroy, ethical success in the same industry they corrupted. Every day I worked to restore trust. They shattered support employees. They neglected honor, the legacy they perverted. I can't speak to their sentencing, but I can speak to consequences. Their choices created ripples that damaged hundreds of lives. Justice requires accountability proportional to harm caused. Thank you both, Judge Hayes said. The defendants may make their statements. My father stood first, reading from prepared notes with none of his old commanding presence. His apology sounded rehearsed, focusing on disappointment in himself rather than harm to others. He sat down without looking at us. My mother's approach was different. She turned to face Marcus and me, directly ignoring the judge entirely. I failed you both, she said, voice breaking, not just as a hotel owner or investor, but as a mother. I was so concerned with appearances that I never saw the reality. Two remarkable children who deserved unconditional love, not conditional approval. I'm sorry. Too late, too little, but sorry, nonetheless. Sorry. The words might have meant something if they hadn't come at the moment when meaning could benefit her. Even facing prison, she performed, rather than felt seeking advantage rather than absolution. Judge Hayes pronounced sentence with grave finality. 8 years for my father, 6 for my mother with restitution requirements that would claim everything they had left. They were led away in handcuffs, my father maintaining stoic dignity while my mother sobbed dramatically. Neither looked back at their children sitting side by side in the gallery. Outside the courthouse, Marcus and I stood in unexpected sunshine, the storm having passed during proceedings. Reporters shouted questions we didn't answer, focused instead on processing what had just ended. "Want to get drunk?" Marcus asked. "Want to get coffee and talk like actual siblings for the first time in our lives?" His smile was answer enough. We found a quiet cafe away from the financial district, ordered too much caffeine and sugar, and began the hard work of building something our parents had never allowed genuine connection. "I hated you for so long," he admitted over his third espresso. "Not really you, but the version of you they created in my head. The threat, the competition, the one who'd steal what was rightfully mine. While I hated you for being everything they wanted, everything I couldn't be, no matter how hard I tried." I stirred my latte, finding patterns in the foam. We were both prisoners, just in different cells. So what now? How do we move forward? I thought about it, really considered what family could mean when stripped of toxic dynamics. We start fresh, not as the Wellington heirs, but as Marcus and Antonia, two people discovering if they actually like each other without parental poison in the mix. I'd like that. He paused, vulnerability flickering across features I was learning to read without defensive filters. "I've been thinking about hospitality differently. Your way, not theirs. Service as dignity, not servitude. Building value, not extracting it." "The boutique taught you that." "Working night shifts taught me that. Seeing how guests treat staff when they think no one important is watching. Understanding that every interaction matters." He met my eyes. "I want to do better. Be better. Maybe you could mentor me. Not as sister to brother, but as someone who knows to someone who wants to learn." The request surprised and touched me. Marcus raised to inherit everything, asking to learn from the sister trained to accept nothing. I could do that. But understand, I won't go easy because we share DNA. You'll earn every opportunity. I wouldn't want it any other way. Earned success is the only kind worth having, right? We spent the afternoon planning tentatively, carefully. Marcus would continue at the boutique while taking additional courses in hospitality management. I'd review his progress monthly, providing guidance without shortcuts. We'd build professional respect alongside personal healing, neither forcing the other. "Oh, there's something else," Marcus said as we prepared to leave. "I've been gathering evidence about Dad's other activities, stuff the FBI missed because they focused on the embezzlement." My stomach clenched. "What kind of activities?" "Kickbacks from construction contracts, discriminatory hiring practices, some harassment settlements Mom helped bury." He pulled out a flash drive. "It's all here. I thought about giving it to prosecutors, but they have enough. So I'm giving it to you. Do whatever you think serves justice." I took the drive, feeling its weight exceed its physical mass. More evidence of our parents' corruption, more lives they damaged, more reasons their sentence was justified, but also more pain for Marcus, who'd compiled proof of his parents' monstrosity while grappling with loving them anyway. This couldn't have been easy to put together. Dr. Patel calls it productive processing, channeling anger into action that serves others rather than destroys myself. His smile was rueful. Turns out I inherited something from them after all, the ability to document everything, just using it differently. That evening, I sat in my office reviewing Marcus's files. Each revelation was worse than the last, painting my parents not just as financial criminals, but as people who'd weaponized power against anyone vulnerable. The harassment settlements particularly sickened me. Young employees silenced with money and threats, careers destroyed for refusing advances or reporting misconduct. Margaret Chen reviewed everything with professional disgust. We could reopen investigations, pursue civil actions on behalf of victims. Do it, I decided. Set up a fund for anyone harmed by their actions beyond the investor fraud. Full compensation, plus therapy support if needed. The estate forfeiture will cover it. That's millions more in liability. Then it's millions that should be paid. Every dollar they hoarded through hurting others needs to go toward healing. I thought of Marcus gathering this evidence of the courage it took to document parental evil. Justice isn't just about punishment, it's about restoration. The fund announcement brought unexpected responses. Former employees came forward with stories spanning decades. We paid settlements without requiring silence, validated experiences without legal gymnastics. The Grand Wellington's reputation, rather than suffering from association, grew as industry watchers recognized genuine accountability. Marcus and I met monthly as promised. I reviewed his performance, suggested improvements, challenged assumptions he'd inherited. But more importantly, we talked about childhood memories now recontextualized, about dreams deferred or destroyed, about building lives undefined by our parents' failures. 6 months after sentencing, he earned his first promotion through merit rather than name. The pride on his face when sharing the news was worth every difficult conversation we'd navigated. "I'm thinking about the future," he said over our regular coffee. "Maybe someday, if I prove myself, if I earn it, maybe I could work with you. Not at the Grand Wellington, too much history there, but somewhere in the celestial family?" So prove yourself first," I said, but my smile took any sting from the words. "Then we'll talk about possibilities." That night, I walked through the Grand Wellington seeing not just successful transformation, but active redemption. Every thriving employee represented justice for those our parents had diminished. Every satisfied guest proved that excellence didn't require exploitation. Every honest prophet showed that integrity and success weren't opposing forces. My phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. "Thank you for showing me what family could be." I typed back, "Thank you for being brave enough to learn." The reckoning was complete. Not just legal consequences for criminal parents, but personal reconciliation between siblings they'd tried to destroy. We'd built from ruins something they'd never understood: genuine connection based on respect rather than manipulation, support rather than sabotage. In her cell, my mother would be writing letters I'd never opened, performing remorse for an audience of guards and fellow inmates. In his, my father would be maintaining rigid dignity while his empire existed only in memory. But in the real world, their children were discovering that family could mean choice rather than chance, that love could exist without conditions, that success meant lifting others rather than climbing over them. The reckoning had revealed truth. And truth, it turned out, was the foundation for everything worth building. 6 months into my parents' incarceration, the civil lawsuits began multiplying like storm clouds before a hurricane. The criminal convictions had opened floodgates of litigation from investors, former employees, and business partners who'd suffered under Wellington management. But the case that would define everything came from an unexpected source: the employees' pension fund. Margaret Chen brought me the filing on a morning when spring was trying to break through winter's grip. "This is different from the others," she said, placing documents before me with unusual gravity. "The pension fund trustees aren't just seeking damages. They want to prove systematic breach of fiduciary duty going back 20 years. I read through the allegations, each more damning than the last. My parents hadn't just skimmed from operations. They'd borrowed against pension funds for personal investments, delayed contributions during profitable years, and hidden shortfalls through creative accounting that bordered on fiction." "How many employees are affected?" "6. Every single person who worked at the Grand Wellington for more than 5 years between 1995 and our acquisition. Over 800 people, some now retired, living on pensions that should be 40% larger." The number hit like a physical blow. 800 people who'd given their careers to our family's hotel trusted their futures to Wellington management, only to have that trust systematically betrayed. These weren't abstract investors, but faces I knew: the bellmen who'd remembered me as a child, housekeepers who'd worked through holidays, engineers who'd kept the building running despite budget cuts. "We need to make this right," I said. "Celestial has no legal obligation. We bought assets, not liabilities. The pension fund issue sits with Wellington Holdings' bankruptcy estate." "I'm not talking about legal obligations." Ayesud moved to the window where morning light illuminated the city's endless ambitions. "I'm talking about moral ones. These people built the Grand Wellington. They deserve security we can provide." Margaret's expression shifted from lawyer to human. "What are you proposing?" "Calculate what they should have received. Full pension values without the theft. Then figure out what it costs to make them whole." "Antonia, that could be $50 million, maybe more." "Then we'd better figure out how to find it." The decision sparked fierce debate among Celestial's board. Harrison Cross led the opposition, arguing fiscal responsibility and shareholder interests. But I'd learned from Sarah how to build coalitions, and newer board members understood that ethical leadership created long-term value beyond quarterly reports. While internal battles raged, the pension fund trial proceeded. As the largest individual shareholder of the bankrupt Wellington Holdings, I was called to testify. The prospect of facing my parents' victims in court, explaining how I'd unknowingly benefited from their theft, felt like walking into Judgment Day. The federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan had become familiar territory, but entering as a witness rather than observer changed everything. The courtroom was packed with retirees and current employees, people whose futures had been mortgaged for Wellington family comfort. "State your name for the record," the pension fund attorney began. "Antonia Marie Rodriguez, formerly Antonia Wellington." "Mrs. Rodriguez, what was your understanding of the Grand Wellington's pension fund management during your time as a family member?" I chose honesty over ease. I had no understanding. Financial matters were never discussed with me. I was raised to plan parties, not review pension funding. "Yet you benefited from the hotel's profits." "Until age 22, yes. Private schools, designer clothes, a lifestyle funded by what I now know included stolen pension money." I met eyes in the gallery, seeing recognition and resentment in equal measure. I benefited from theft I didn't know was occurring. That ignorance doesn't absolve me of responsibility to make amends. The questioning continued for hours. I detailed my estrangement, my journey through hospitality, the shock of discovering my parents' crimes. But I also acknowledged uncomfortable truths: that my education had been funded by exploitation, that my childhood comfort came at the cost of others' security. "Do you believe Celestial Hotels bears any responsibility for the pension shortfalls?" the attorney asked. "Legally, no. Morally, absolutely." I turned to address the gallery directly. "We bought more than real estate and reputation. We bought the trust of employees who chose to stay through the transition. That trust comes with obligations beyond contracts." My parents' attorney tried to shift blame during cross-examination, suggesting I'd engineered their downfall to acquire the hotel cheaply. I remained calm, stating facts without emotion, letting truth speak louder than their desperate narratives. "Isn't it convenient that your due diligence uncovered crimes that lowered the purchase price? What's convenient is how my parents hid those crimes for 20 years, while employees wondered why their retirement calculations never matched promises." I kept my voice level despite rising anger. "We reported findings to authorities immediately. Any benefit to negotiations was incidental to doing what they never did: the right thing." The trial stretched for 2 weeks. Witness after witness testified about promises broken, retirements, delayed medical procedures, postponed because pensions paid less than projected. Maria took the stand, describing how her mother had worked at the Grand Wellington for 30 years, only to discover her pension was worth half its promised value. She died still working, Maria said quietly. 73 years old, cleaning rooms because retirement was impossible. Also, the Wellingtons could maintain their lifestyle. Each testimony was another weight on conscience I hadn't known I carried. That evening, I called an emergency meeting with Celestial's executive team. "We're fully funding the pension shortfall," I announced. "Not through the bankruptcy court, not through legal settlements, but directly. Every employee gets what they were promised, plus interest. The board will revolt," our CFO warned. "Then I'll convince them otherwise. Or I'll fund it personally." I'd done the math. Between my salary bonuses and stock options, I could cover a significant portion. These people gave their careers to a hotel my family ransacked. Justice demands restoration. The announcement, when made public, sent shockwaves through the industry. No acquiring company had ever voluntarily assumed such obligations. The financial press called it either visionary leadership or dangerous precedent. I called it overdue justice. The trial verdict came down decisively. Wellington Holdings was liable for all pension shortfalls plus damages, but since the company was bankrupt, victory was Pyrrhic for plaintiffs, until we stepped in. The ceremony was held in the Grand Wellington's ballroom. 800 current and former employees gathered to receive checks that represented more than money validation, respect, and proof that new management meant new values. I stood before them, humbled by their grace in accepting what should never have been stolen. "This doesn't erase the past," I said. "Nothing can restore years of stress, delayed dreams, or those who died without seeing justice. But it's a start, a commitment that the Grand Wellington will never again prosper through employee suffering." The standing ovation wasn't for me, but for the principle that business could choose conscience over contracts, that leadership meant protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. As I presented checks, shaking hands worn by honest work, I saw my parents' legacy transform. Where they'd built walls of greed, we were building bridges of trust. Marcus attended, watching from the back. Afterward, he found me emotionally exhausted but oddly at peace. "That was $53 million, he said quietly. "Way, $53 million in stolen wages, delayed retirements, and broken promises," I corrected. "Cheap price for clean conscience and employee loyalty." "Dad would call you a fool." "Dad's in federal prison for being smart about money and stupid about humanity." I managed a tired smile. "I'd rather be foolish with integrity than brilliant without it." The pension restoration transformed more than balance sheets. Applications for positions at the Grand Wellington surged from top talent wanting to work for leadership that valued people over profits. Guest satisfaction scores reached historic highs as employees radiated pride in their workplace. The story became a Harvard Business School case study in ethical turnaround management. But for me, the real validation came in quiet moments. The housekeeper who thanked me with tears, saying she could finally retire with dignity. The engineer who shared that his wife's cancer treatment was possible because their pension was whole. The bellman who simply said, "Your grandmother would be proud." 3 months after the pension restoration, I received a letter forwarded through lawyers. My father's handwriting, now shaky with age and confinement, filled pages of expensive stationery somehow procured in prison. I read about the pension payments, he wrote. "Patricia calls it throwing good money after bad, but I wonder if perhaps you understand something I never could. We built an empire on extraction, you're building one on investment. The irony that you learned this despite us, rather than from us, isn't lost even on someone as lost as I've become. I won't ask for forgiveness or understanding, but I want you to know the daughter we discarded has become the leader we never were. That's both my deepest shame and, strangely, my only pride." "Your father—" I read it twice, then filed it away. Redemption couldn't be earned through letters from prison, but recognition of truth was a start. Perhaps that was enough. The trial had ended with verdicts that surprised no one, but the real judgment had come from 800 employees whose trust we'd earned by doing what my parents never could, putting their welfare above our wealth. In courtrooms, justice was proclaimed. In ballrooms, it was delivered. And in the ledgers of conscience, debts were finally fully paid. The Grand Wellington stood taller that night, its foundations strengthened not by marble or money, but by the radical idea that business could be both profitable and principled. My parents' trial had condemned them. Our response had redeemed us. And in that gap between their verdict and our values lay the future of everything worth building. 5 years. That's how long it had been since I'd walked into the Grand Wellington as its owner rather than its exile. 5 years of 16-hour days, difficult decisions, and the constant weight of transforming an institution while honoring its history. As I stood in my office on a crisp October morning, looking out at Central Park's autumn glory, I could finally say the rebuilding was complete, but completion, I'd learned, was just another beginning. The transformation showed in every metric. Occupancy held steady at 94%, the highest in Manhattan's luxury market. Revenue had tripled. Employee satisfaction scores led the industry. We'd won awards for innovation, sustainability, and workplace culture, but numbers only told part of the story. The real transformation lived in details. Rosa, who'd followed me from my housekeeping days, now ran a training program that had become the gold standard for hospitality education. Carl from maintenance had patented 2 innovations that we'd licensed to other hotels, sharing profits with him as the inventor. Maria had risen to director of operations, her insight invaluable in bridging old wisdom with new methods. "Package for you," David announced, entering with a worn cardboard box. No return address, but it cleared security. Inside, I found photo albums I hadn't seen in decades. Pictures of the Grand Wellington through the years, including ones of my grandmother at the groundbreaking, my parents on their wedding day in the ballroom, Marcus and me as children playing in the lobby. But at the bottom was a letter in my mother's handwriting. Antonia. I've had 5 years to think about what matters. These photos were in storage the unit paid through next month before everything gets auctioned. I thought you should have them. Not for me or your father, but for the history they represent. The hotel, that is, and that you've made it become. I read about your programs for employees' children, the scholarship funds, the healthcare initiatives. You've built what we only promised. In my cell, I keep one newspaper clipping the story about you funding the pension restoration. I read it when I need reminding that something good came from our failures. I don't expect forgiveness or contact, but I wanted you to know that I see what you've built, and I understand finally why Elizabeth left me her jewelry, but her dreams she saved for you. Your mother. I sat with the albums for hours, watching the Grand Wellington evolve through decades. My grandmother's vision, my parents' stewardship, then the decay that preceded renewal. But the recent photos ones my mother must have printed from online sources showed what we'd accomplished: employees smiling genuinely, guests creating memories, a building that breathed with purpose rather than pretense. "Knock, knock," Marcus said from the doorway. He visited monthly now, though he still worked at the boutique hotel. His recovery from our family's implosion had been slower than mine, but perhaps more thorough. "Bad time." "Looking at history?" I said, showing him the albums. "Mom sent them." He flipped through pages, pausing at pictures of us as children. Look how miserable we were even then. Dressed perfectly positioned, precisely, but absolutely miserable. "We didn't know any better." "No, we didn't." He studied a photo of our parents hosting a charity gala. "They look happy here. Think they ever were?" I think they were happy with success. They just defined it too narrowly to include us. We spent the afternoon reviewing the past while planning the future. Marcus had ideas about boutique properties that could join the Celestial family, maintaining independence while benefiting from shared resources. His years of ground-level work had given him insights I valued more than any MBA. "I have something to tell you," he said eventually. "I've been accepted to Cornell's hospitality program, part-time while still working. I want to earn the education, not just the degree." Pride swelled in my chest. "That's wonderful, really wonderful. I was hoping, would you write a recommendation, not as my sister, but as an industry leader who's observed my growth?" "I already did," I admitted, pulling the letter from my desk. "Sent it last month when I heard you were applying." His eyes watered as he read my honest assessment of his transformation. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did. You've earned recognition for who you've become, not despite our name, but because you transcended it." That evening, I walked through the Grand Wellington as I did every night, checking details, greeting staff, ensuring the magic remained tangible. In the lobby, I found Janet training a new concierge, her patience infinite with someone learning the ropes. The restaurant hummed with conversation and clinking crystal. The spa, my grandmother's innovation now thoroughly modernized, offered serenity to stressed travelers. But it was the employee areas that showed the deepest change. The basement break room had become a wellness center with massage chairs and meditation spaces. The training facilities rivaled hospitality schools. The child care center, suggested by a single mother in housekeeping, had waiting lists from competitors' employees hoping to join our team. "Ms. Rodriguez." A young woman approached nervously. "I'm Emma, the new night auditor. I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity. My mom worked here for 20 years before the changes. She says it's like a different world now." "What did your mother do?" "Accounting. She was one of the ones who noticed discrepancies but was told to stay quiet." Emma's jaw tightened. "She took early retirement rather than participate, lost half her pension because of it." "What's her name?" "Dorothy Chen. She never thought she'd see justice for speaking up." I made a note. Another person to add to our restoration fund, another wrong to right. The work never truly ended. It just evolved. "Tell your mother I'd like to meet her. We have a forensic accounting position open. Experience spotting irregularities would be valuable." Emma's face lit up. "She'd love that. She misses working but couldn't stomach what it had become." "Well, what it's become now might suit her better." The next morning brought a board meeting where we discussed the next 5 years. Expansion plans, innovation initiatives, sustainability goals that would make us carbon neutral by 2030. But first, I had an announcement. "I'm establishing the Elizabeth Wellington Foundation, Gobbosain," I told the assembled directors, "funded initially with my personal stake in the pension restoration returns. It'll provide hospitality education support for industry workers facing hardship and grants for innovative programs that prioritize employee welfare." Using your own money. Harrison Cross asked, though his opposition to my initiatives had long since transformed into grudging admiration. Using money that represents what this industry should be profitable because it values people not despite valuing them. I activated the presentation showing the foundation structure. Sarah Blackwood taught me that true legacy isn't what you leave behind, but what you set in motion. This foundation will ensure the values we've rebuilt here spread throughout hospitality. The vote was unanimous, even Cross recognizing that ethical leadership had become our competitive advantage. As the meeting concluded, he pulled me aside. "Your grandmother would be proud," he said simply. "Sarah, too. You've built something neither of them could in their times, proof that principles and profits align when leadership has courage." That afternoon, I met with architects about the Grand Wellington's next evolution. Not massive changes, but thoughtful improvements, technology that enhanced rather than replaced human service spaces that celebrated history while embracing innovation. The penthouse my parents had occupied would become an event space for employee celebrations, their private sanctuary transformed into shared joy. "There's historical precedent for this design." The lead architect noted showing original blueprints. Your grandmother included similar concepts that were never implemented. I studied her neat handwriting in the margins, ideas decades ahead of their time. Then let's honor her vision, build what she imagined but couldn't create. As sunset painted Manhattan in shades of amber and gold, I returned to the albums my mother had sent. The final pages were empty, waiting for future history. I added recent photos, the pension ceremony, Marcus's promotion celebration, employees' children graduating with scholarships we'd funded. But the last photo was simple, the Grand Wellington at twilight. Every window glowing with warm light, the building itself seeming to pulse with renewed life. On the back I wrote, "Rebuilt with love, sustained by justice, elevated by those who believe service is the highest calling." My phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. "Dinner tomorrow. I want to discuss an idea about creating boutique properties that specialize in second chances, hiring people, rebuilding their lives like we rebuilt ours." I smiled, typing back, "Yes, let's build something else worth saving." The Grand Wellington stood strong that night, no longer monument to ego, but testament to transformation. In the restaurant, guests created memories. In the offices, staff planned innovations. In the foundation's new headquarters, dreams took shape for industry-wide change. Rebuilding was complete, but building never stopped. Each day brought new opportunities to prove that business could elevate rather than exploit, that success meant lifting others as you climbed. My parents had built with greed and fallen to justice. We rebuilt with grace and rose through service. 5 years ago, I'd reclaimed a building. Now that building had reclaimed its soul. And in that transformation lay the blueprint for everything still to come: more hotels, to save more employees, to empower more, proof that the Wellington name could mean wisdom rather than warning. The work continued, the legacy evolved, and somewhere in federal prisons, 2 people who'd never understood that principle served sentences that were justice for the past. While in Manhattan, their daughter served notice that the future would be different, built on rock rather than sand, measured in lives improved rather than wealth extracted, and sustained by the radical belief that hospitality meant exactly what the word implied: treating others with the grace you hope to receive. The rebuilding was complete. The building had just begun. 10 years had passed since that morning when I'd revoked my parents' VIP access to their own hotel. A decade of transformation, growth, and sometimes painful evolution. As I sat in the Grand Wellington's restored rooftop garden watching Manhattan wake beneath a spring sunrise, my hand rested on the gentle swell of my pregnancy. 7 months along with a daughter who would never know the conditional love that had shaped my childhood. "You're up early," my husband Daniel said, joining me with herbal tea. He was a pediatric surgeon I'd met at one of our charity galas, someone who understood that healing came in many forms. His kindness had caught me off guard after years of defensive walls. His patience had worn them down. "She's active in the mornings," I said, feeling tiny movements that still amaze me. "Future hotelier in training. Or future doctor, or future anything she wants without predetermined expectations." He kissed my temple, understanding the weight behind those words. "The interview team will be here at 9. I nodded. Today, the Times was doing a feature on the Grand Wellington's decade of transformation. They'd requested family photos, which is why Marcus was driving down from Boston, where he now ran 3 boutique properties focused on rehabilitation and second chances. His success had been hard-earned and entirely his own. Morning, Aunt Tony. Emma Chen called out, arriving early as always. She'd risen from night auditor to assistant general manager, her mother Dorothy, now our chief compliance officer. "The presidential suite is ready for the photo shoot. I've also arranged the archival materials you requested." The morning filled with preparations. Staff who'd been with us through the transformation assembled in their finest uniforms. The building itself seemed to glow, every surface reflecting the care invested in its renewal. By the time the journalism team arrived, the Grand Wellington was showing its best face, which happened to be its everyday face. Ms. Rodriguez, the lead reporter Sandra Williams, began as we toured the property. 10 years ago, this hotel was failing under your parents' management. Today, it's considered the gold standard for ethical luxury hospitality. How do you measure that transformation? Not in occupancy rates or revenue, though both are at historic highs, I said, pausing in the lobby where my grandmother's portrait held place of honor. I measure it in the housekeeper who just bought her first home, the bellman, whose daughter graduated debt-free thanks to our education fund, the entire industry shift toward valuing employees as partners rather than expenses. We walked through the Employee Wellness Center, the child care facility, the training rooms where industry professionals came to learn our methods. Each space told a story of promise-kept values, lived transformation sustained through daily choices. Your parents were released 2 years ago, Sandra noted carefully. Has there been any contact? My mother sends letters I don't open. My father, I'm told, lives quietly in Florida. Their story ended when they chose greed over grace. Ours began when we chose to build something better from their ruins. I touched my belly unconsciously. My daughter will know her family's history, including its failures, but she'll define her own story. Marcus arrived during the midday shoot looking confident in a way that had taken years to develop. His boutique properties had won awards for innovative rehabilitation programs, hiring people and rebuilding after addiction, incarceration, or homelessness. He'd found his calling in offering the second chances our parents never gave. "Ready for photos?" he asked, straightening his tie nervously. Despite our healed relationship, formal occasions still triggered old anxieties. "Almost. But first," I handed him an envelope, "I wanted you to be the first to know." Inside was the paperwork establishing the Marcus Wellington Second Chances Fund within our foundation. His property's model would expand nationwide, supported by grants and expertise. His eyes widened as he absorbed the implications. "Tony, I don't have words." "You earned them through actions. Every person you've hired who others wouldn't, every life transformed through meaningful work, every proof that our name can mean redemption rather than ruin." I hugged him carefully around my expanding middle. "Besides, your niece needs to see her uncle building bridges where our parents built walls." The photo shoot captured us throughout the hotel, in the boardroom, where I'd first claimed my seat, the kitchen where former addicts now created culinary art, the garden where employees' children played while their parents worked. But the most powerful image was unplanned, Marcus and I standing before our grandmother's portrait, no longer rivals, but allies in honoring her true legacy. "Your grandmother would be proud," Sandra observed, "building what she envisioned but couldn't accomplish in her era." "She planted seeds," I said. "We just had better soil to grow them in. Every generation gets to choose repeat the patterns or break them. We chose to break them." The afternoon brought a surprise. Harrison Cross, now in his 80s but sharp as ever, arrived with a gift. The original architectural plans for the Grand Wellington, annotated in my grandmother's hand, discovered in his late father's files. "Your grandmother gave these to my father for safekeeping when she realized your grandfather was sidelining her. She hoped someday they'd find their way to someone who'd understand her vision." He placed the aged papers in my hands. "I think they found their home." I studied her notes, seeing ideas that wouldn't become industry standard for decades, employee support programs, guest services that anticipated needs, sustainable practices before the term existed. Elizabeth Wellington had been a visionary, trapped by her era's limitations, but her dreams had survived, waiting for the right moment and the right person to implement them. We'll frame these, I decided, display them in the lobby with the full story, let every guest understand that innovation isn't new but renewed, that the best ideas sometimes wait generations for their time. As evening approached, Daniel and I hosted dinner in our penthouse apartment. Not my parents' cold showplace, but a warm home where Marcus was always welcome, where friends gathered without calculating advantage. My chosen family had replaced the one that chose status over substance. A toast. Marcus proposed, raising his glass of champagne while I lifted sparkling cider. To 10 years of proving them wrong, to the next 10 years of proving ourselves right, and to my niece who will inherit not a hotel empire but something better, the knowledge that worth isn't measured in wealth but in how many lives you lift while building your own. We clinked glasses as sunset painted the city in shades of promise. Below us, the Grand Wellington hummed with purposeful energy. Guests checking into memories, employees proud of their workplace, a building that had become beacon for an industry transformed. Later, alone in my office, I opened the safe containing documents that charted this journey, the text message that started it all, Sarah's strategic plans, the FBI evidence, the pension restoration records, but at the bottom lay 2 unopened letters, recent ones from each parent. For the first time in 8 years, I broke the seals. My father's was brief. I work as a bookkeeper for a small firm, honest work for honest wages. It's harder than I expected and worth more than I knew. Your mother thinks I'm punishing myself. Maybe I'm finally learning what you always understood. Or W. My mother's was longer, filled with the elaborate prose that once decorated charity invitations. I volunteer at a women's shelter now. They don't know my history, only that I understand how pride can lead to downfall. I see myself in every woman who chose appearance over authenticity until the facade cracked. I'm learning to be useful rather than ornamental. Perhaps redemption is possible even for those who discovered it too late. P.W. I filed both letters without response. Their journeys were their own, separate from the life I'd built. But knowing they'd found humility in their ruins added a grace note to the symphony of transformation. My daughter kicked, reminding me that the future mattered more than the past. She would grow up seeing service as strength, watching her mother lead through example rather than edict. The Wellington name would mean something different for her, not burden, but possibility, not predetermined path, but open road. Your move, little one, I whispered, feeling her respond to my voice, but no pressure, just promise to build something worthy of those who'll come after you. The stars emerged over Manhattan, each light a story, a dream, a possibility. The Grand Wellington stood among them, no longer monument to ego, but testament to evolution. What had begun with bitterness had transformed through perseverance into something better than revenge. Proof that cycles could be broken, that dignity could be restored, that the highest use of power was empowering others. I thought of Sarah, gone 8 years, but present in every ethical choice. Of grandmother Elizabeth, whose vision had simply been ahead of its time. Of the employees who trusted a disowned daughter to lead them from exploitation to excellence. Of Marcus, who'd found his own path to meaning. Even of my parents learning late what we discovered early, that true wealth lay in what you built for others, not what you hoarded for yourself. The circle was complete, but not closed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove that business could be both profitable and principled. My daughter would arrive in 8 weeks to a world where her mother ran hotels that honored humanity, where her uncle offered second chances, where her heritage included both cautionary tales and inspiring transformations. But tonight, in the hotel that had been my prison and became my purpose, I simply felt grateful for the journey that led here, for the people who'd walked it with me, for the future we'd built from the rubble of the past. The Grand Wellington's lights shone steady in the darkness, a beacon for those who believed excellence meant elevation, that true luxury was lifting others as you rose. 10 years ago, I'd made a phone call that changed everything. Tonight, I made a different call. Rosa Seiss. It's Antonia. I wanted you to know we're naming the new Employee Education Center after you, the Rosa Martinez Center for Hospitality Excellence, because you taught me that dignity in service is the highest calling, and that lesson transformed an industry. Her tears were audible through the phone. Mija, you transformed yourself. I just showed you the mop bucket. We laughed through our shared tears, understanding that sometimes the smallest acts created the largest changes, that revenge served cold was nothing compared to success served with grace. As the city settled into sleep, I remained at my window, hand on my future heart, in my present mind, finally free of the past. The Grand Wellington stood strong beneath stars that had watched its rise, fall, and resurrection. My parents' empire had crumbled, but from its ashes, we'd built something unbreakable, proof that love, unlike legacy, couldn't be stolen. Only earned, only given. Only multiplied through the revolutionary act of valuing every person who helped you rise. The circle was complete. The story continued. Hence, somewhere in the night, a hotel breathed with the dreams of those who'd learned that true power lay not in what you could take, but in how much you could give while building something worthy of tomorrow. Thank you for joining Antonia's journey. May you find the courage to revoke the keycard of anyone who tries to lock you out of your own possibility, and the wisdom to know that the best revenge is building something better. What will you build today?